After 50 agonizing years in a world that wasn't his, Seo's story was supposed to end here, dying alone and forgotten. For half a century, he'd been trapped in this brutal fantasy world after a freak accident. A sudden landslide had dragged him and his coworkers from their mundane lives into the unknown. They awoke in a world of myth and magic, ruled by powerful beings who walked among the clouds. And while his colleagues were discovered to possess legendary talents, he was nothing special. One by one, they were chosen by these godlike figures, leaving him completely behind. Reality was cruel. He possessed no unique abilities whatsoever. Even his boss, Director Kim, discovered a hidden talent for martial arts and left to become a legend. And just like that, Seo was left utterly alone once again. 50 years of struggle led to this, dying from a common cold, a forgotten man in a desolate hut. His entire life, everything he'd ever worked for, had been taken from him. With his final breath, he wished for the power he never had. But death was not the end. He awakens, not as a dying old man, but in the young body he arrived in 50 years ago. He finally understands, upon his death, he gained the ultimate power of regression. But before he can process his second chance, the past comes for him. His abusive section chief, Jian, lands a fist to his face. Just like the first time, the chief furiously blames him for the crash, looking for a scapegoat. But this time, Seo bites back, revealing the truth. Jian was the one who forced him to drive while exhausted. He remembers his first life, a 50-year cycle of bowing his head and apologizing to every tormentor. But those years of pain taught him a valuable lesson. You only kneel to those you truly can't handle. With a lifetime of rage simmering inside, he decides this time will be different. He smirks, realizing he no longer needs to bow to a weakling like this, and unleashes half a century of pent-up fury in a single punch. Every beating he ever endured from bandits and corrupt officials fueled his rage. All that pain is now being paid back in full. He didn't learn fancy martial arts in his past life, he learned the brutal, practical reality of violence. And just like that, the bully who started his lifetime of misery is reduced to a broken, whimpering mess. His first life ended in regret, his second will begin with revenge. Director Kim and the others are shocked, questioning how Manager Seo could have attacked his colleague so violently. Playing the part of someone who just lost his temper, Yunyun apologizes to the group for shocking them. He internally notes that he won't be seeing most of these people again, before publicly apologizing for the accident and taking responsibility as the driver. Director Kim steps in to mediate, acknowledging that Section Chief Jian was harsh, but tells Yunyun that he overreacted and should apologize directly. Outwardly, he agrees with the director, while internally noting that this is one person he needs to keep on his side, and recalls his past life, remembering that Director Kim will become one of the strongest martial artists, and decides that supporting him now will yield benefits in the future. With steely resolve, he realizes his first priority is to get on the director's good side immediately. Feigning remorse, he offers an apology to the seething section chief, admitting his reaction was unwarranted. Beaten and humiliated, John Myung-hoon starts to curse at him, but Eun-hyun's cold, silent stare is enough to cut his curse short. Intimidated, the section chief swallows his anger and looks away. Taking charge, Director Kim suggests that they find their way out of the woods and look for a village. Eun-hyun agrees, stating that finding a village would indeed be the logical thing to do. But as his colleagues take in the unfamiliar landscape, he knows that the common sense from their world has no place here. He remembers the brutal reality of this world, a place where immortals fight for power, and the strong devour the weak. He knows they are in a forest called the Ascension Path, and from his past life, he knows that there are no villages, cities, or nations anywhere near their current location. So, using his foreknowledge, he points out that the sun is setting and suggests they find a safe place for shelter. Seeing the sense in his suggestion, Director Kim readily agrees. One of his colleagues then brings up the car, remembering all the workshop supplies packed in the trunk. While Eun-hyun knows the car is gone forever, he also knows his colleagues won't simply believe him if he says so. So instead of arguing, he suggests they split up to be more efficient. He proposes that one team look for shelter while the other searches for the car, agreeing that they'll meet back before dark. Later, as they sit around a fire he built, the group is still trying to process their situation. One of the women voices their shared confusion, wondering how they could have been in a car during a landslide, only to end up here while the car itself is gone. The others admit they don't get it either, but they're momentarily distracted by the chestnut-like taste of the food Eun-hyun found for them. He calmly tells his colleagues to eat as much as they want, assuring them he found plenty of the nuts. Director Kim praises him, noting that despite the serious situation, his diligence has made things almost feel fun. But he also shows his concern, remembering that Yunyun was tired from working late the previous day before he had to drive. Another colleague chimes in, agreeing that their manager is incredibly diligent. One of the women comments that thanks to the cave he found, the whole ordeal feels more like camping. At this, our guy humbly claims he was just lucky, though he secretly remembers that in his past life, they only found this very cave after being lost for hours. As his colleagues tell him to just accept the compliment, he silently prepares himself for what's to come. He savors the moment, knowing that tonight will be the last time they can all relax and laugh together like this. Under the full moon, his ominous premonition hangs in the air. Later that night, Yunyun trembles as he prostrates himself, offering greetings to the fearsome lord of the forest. The great fox spirit looms over him, remarking on his unique scent, one it has never encountered in its thousands of years of life. Awakened by the commotion, one of the women drowsily asks what's going on, and then, the group's peaceful night shatters as they see the giant beast and begin screaming in terror. Just then, Yunyun desperately shouts at his panicked colleagues to get on their knees and show respect to the lord of the forest. The beast scoffs at the rude humans, stating that it would normally rip off all their limbs for such disrespect. However, since Yunyun knows how to show proper respect, the lord of the forest decides to forgive them this time. But the fox demands a price for trespassing in its territory. If one of them offers an arm, it will allow the rest to stay. Yunhyun recalls his past life, remembering how everyone panicked at the sight of the monster. Because they had angered the fox, they all ended up maimed and close to death in the previous timeline. This time, however, the fox licks its chops, pleased with his manners, and repeats its demand for only a single arm, a much better deal than before. He realizes that only one person's arm is needed to secure their safety. Furthermore, he knows that a lost arm is a temporary injury, one that can be healed by the cultivators who will appear in 2 days. And he has also prepared a special herb to reduce the pain of the sacrifice. Steeling himself, he declares that he will be the one to offer his arm. His colleagues can only stare in disbelief at his sudden and shocking declaration. Acknowledging his respectful gesture, the Lord of the Forest promises to make the process as painless as possible as it opens its massive jaws. He lets out a blood-curdling scream as the fox tears his arm from his body. The great fox spirit then swiftly swallows the severed limb. His colleagues recoil in horror at the brutal sight. Writhing in agony, he desperately reaches for the pain-reducing herb he had prepared. Crying out from the excruciating pain, he shoves the herb into his mouth. The fox remarks that despite his unique smell, his arm tastes just as bad as any other human's due to the impurities in his veins. As the herb begins to take effect, Yunyun catches his breath and apologizes that his offering wasn't good enough. With the deal sealed, the Lord of the Forest grants them permission to stay in its territory for 7 days, protected by its divinity. And with a powerful leap, the divine beast vanishes, leaving a stunned Yunyun behind. Once the spell of terror is broken, his colleagues rush towards him, calling his name in concern. Weak from the ordeal, he tells them to go back inside the cave, promising to explain everything. Back in the cave, he begins to spin a tale, claiming he met the fox earlier that morning. His colleagues cry out in shock as he tells them the fox revealed they are now in the world of the Murum. Director Kim expresses his disbelief, never having imagined they'd end up in the fabled world of martial arts. However, our guy reassures them that they are safe for a week, but Director Kim anxiously asks what will happen after that. Our guy grimly states that after a week, they will need to give up something else. Announcing that he's sleepy from the ordeal, he settles down to rest, leaving his terrified colleagues to ponder their fate. As a strange ringed moon hangs in the sky, the group's true nature begins to surface. One of the women scolds Section Chief Jian for his callousness, reminding him that their manager sacrificed his own arm for them. Feigning sleep, Yunyun listens as she questions who would be willing to give up an arm and a leg in a week's time. Outside, the other men rationalize that their manager is useful for now, but Jian states they should just learn what they can from him within a week, and coldly concludes that since Yunyun has already lost an arm, he won't last long anyway and should be their next sacrifice. From the shadows of the cave, Seo Yunyun listens as his cowardly colleagues plot to sacrifice him, suggesting they chop off one of his limbs each week to appease the fox. As their treacherous conversation continues, he quietly picks up a sharp, heavy rock, his intentions hidden in the darkness. He internally remarks that hearing his colleagues plan his demise is, to say the least, not a pleasant experience. Still, he coolly assesses the situation, confident that the brutal fighting skills he learned over 50 years would allow him to kill Jian Myung-hoon with just one arm. Meanwhile, Jian continues to instigate the group, trying to convince them that sacrificing Yunyun is their only option for survival. A cold fury washes over Yunyun as he contemplates whether he should just kill him on the spot. However, after a deep breath, he decides against immediate revenge, letting the rock fall from his hand. He reasons that acting too cruelly right now could damage his future alliance with Director Kim, a key part of his long-term plan. Just then, he listens as Kim silences the group with a chilling threat to Jeon Myung-hoon, warning him to shut his mouth or have his ankles broken again. At this, our guy sarcastically states that they're all good people, just caught in a confusing situation. The next day dawns, bringing with it more challenges in the vibrant but dangerous forest. Using his foreknowledge, Yoon-hyun knows the two-headed snake they've encountered only requires a small blood tribute, unlike the voracious fox. This time, Chief O steps forward, willing to offer his own arm for the tribute since it's just a small amount of blood. But after taking a bite, the snake recoils in disgust, spitting out the blood and declaring it the worst it has ever tasted. Yoon-hyun dryly comments that it's no surprise, given that the blood of a 21st century worker is drenched in nicotine and cholesterol. Dropping all pretense of respect, he then orders his former boss, Jeon Myung-hoon, to accompany him to gather herbs, luring him with the promise of food. Desperate and hungry, Myung-hoon hesitantly agrees after Yoon-hyun promises to teach him about edible plants. To manipulate him, he lies, claiming he plans to sacrifice his other arm next week and needs Myung-hoon to learn survival skills for when he's gone. Completely fooled, a relieved Myung-hoon tearfully thanks him, believing he's being taught how to survive. Yoon-hyun inwardly scoffs at his gratitude, knowing full well that the fox won't return and this knowledge will be useless. Under the guise of training, Yoon-hyun sadistically torments his former bully, screaming at him to concentrate and stop picking the wrong fruit. Myung-hoon apologizes profusely as our protagonist continues to berate him, warning that such a simple mistake could get him killed. As Myung-hoon scrambles in fear, Yoon-hyun watches with a cold, calculating gaze, enjoying his petty revenge. Exhausted from digging for herbs under Yoon-hyun's command, Jeon Myung-hoon begs for a break. Our guy recalls how Myung-hoon used to punish him in the same way, coldly telling him to hurry up before dusk falls. While digging, Myung-hoon's efforts are unexpectedly rewarded when he unearths what appears to be a massive, man-shaped ginseng root. Stunned by the size of his discovery, he gapes in awe, asking if it's natural wild ginseng. Yoon-hyun casually dismisses it as something like that, though he internally identifies the precious herb as a yellow bamboo root, and muses that the rich energy of the ascension path is what allowed the typically small root to grow to such a phenomenal size. He knows this root, while useless to cultivators, is an extremely precious medicine for martial artists and will be perfect for Director Kim. Spotting more roots, he instructs a now ecstatic Jeon to use his shirt to carry their haul. As evening approaches, Yoon-hyun notices a distant flicker of energy, realizing with perfect timing that the cultivators are about to arrive. Suddenly, a brilliant explosion of multicolored energy tears through the sky, heralding the arrival of powerful beings. The immense spiritual pressure overwhelms Jeon Myung-hoon, who collapses, screaming in agony. Chief O is also brought to his knees by the overwhelming force radiating from the sky. While some of the mortals are incapacitated by the pressure, Kim watches in terror as three figures descend from above. The masters of three great sects, Hyogwak, Buko, and the Black Ghost Valley Master have arrived, and they immediately sense the uncut talent among the group. As a dumbfounded Director Kim questions who they are, the cultivators begin bickering over who gets to claim the potential disciples. The cultivators quickly discern that only 3 of the Earthlings possess spiritual roots, dismissing the rest as insignificant mortals. Hyogwak, master of the Golden Divine Heavenly Thunder sect, summons a ball of pure lightning to test Jeon Myung-hoon's aptitude. The lightning strikes Myung-hoon, causing him to scream as his latent power, the body of Heavenly Golden Thunder, is awakened. Hyogwak expresses his delight at the discovery, but the Black Ghost Valley Master impatiently declares it's his turn. Deputy Manager Kang gasps in pain as the Black Ghost Valley Master's power begins to assess her own potential. A wave of dark, spectral energy envelops her, revealing her hidden talent. The Black Ghost Valley Master cackles with glee upon discovering she possesses the legendary ghostly yin transforming immortal root. Meanwhile, Buko of the Azure Heaven Creation sect is amazed to find that Chief O possesses a unique holy body. With a greedy smile, he attempts to claim all 3 talented individuals for his sect, praising their world-changing potential. Chief O feels an overwhelming pressure from the Master's intent, realizing that refusing the offer would mean certain death. The sect masters begin to argue fiercely, each trying to persuade the new disciples to join their respective factions with promises of power and immortality. They lay out visions of fame, untold wealth, and the power to overturn the heavens, trying to tempt the 3 chosen colleagues. As the cultivators prepare to leave with their new recruits, one of the remaining mortals desperately begs for a way out of the forest. Ignoring the plea, Hyogwak casually pulls out a small vial of elixir for his new disciple. He dismissively calls the humans worrisome mortals as he prepares to cleanse Jeon Myung-hoon's body. The elixir purges the impurities from Myung-hoon's body, a process that causes him to scream while the cultivator scoffs at his worthless mortal form. Noticing Yunyun's injury, Buko remarks on his guts for sacrificing an arm to the fox and decides to offer a bit of help. A mystical blue flame engulfs Eunhoon's stump, miraculously regenerating his arm, for which he stammers a grateful thank you. Before departing, Buko informs the remaining group that they've cleared the ascension path of beasts, making it safe for the next 10 years. Director Kim makes a last-ditch effort, screaming for the departing cultivators to at least tell them which way to go, and he shouts his colleagues' names in despair as the cultivators ascend into the sky, leaving him behind without a second thought. Yunyun calmly recalls that the exact same thing happened in his past life. The powerful cultivators ignored the pleas of mortals as if they were insects. Looking at his restored limb, he acknowledges the one silver lining. At least this time, his arm is healed. Director Kim shouts into the empty sky about their hopeless situation, and wonders if the lights in the distance could lead them to safety. The following day, a fierce thunderstorm rolls in, drenching the forest and the survivors. As the rain pours down, the remaining few take shelter in their cave, their situation growing more grim. Deputy manager? Oh, one of the colleagues left behind, lies on the cave floor, sick and coughing up blood. A worried female colleague asks Yunhyun for help, desperate to find an herb for Deputy Manager Oh's terrible condition. Yet Yunyun remains unnervingly calm, telling them to wait a little longer and cryptically predicting that someone will appear to heal her. The others are baffled by his strange confidence as he stands at the mouth of the cave, waiting for his prediction to come true. Just then, a mysterious figure observes the group from the shadows, noting the presence of mortals on the ascension path. He compares the survivors to ants caught in a battle of dragons as he steps into the light. Startled by his sudden appearance, a panicked Director Kim demands to know the stranger's identity. With a serene smile, the mysterious man introduces himself as the Sea Dragon King, Seo Hueol. The group can only watch in stunned silence as the Sea Dragon King, Seo Hueol, appears amidst a storm he seemingly controls, and explains that he came to investigate the storm's cause, suspecting the unconscious woman, Deputy Manager Oh, is the source of the sorcery. He muses aloud how strange it is that an ordinary, untrained mortal could unconsciously wield such overwhelming power. Playing the part of a confused mortal, Seo Yunyun asks why so many powerful beings keep appearing and taking his companions. At this, the Sea Dragon King chuckles. Summarizing the unbelievable situation, Yunyun's colleagues had potential, and cultivators conveniently appeared to take them away. Yunyun confirms that yes, that's exactly right, and now the Sea Dragon King himself has conveniently appeared before yet another person with hidden power. With a knowing smirk, he asks the dear mortal if he even knows where they are. He then reveals their location is the Ascension Path, a divine bridge leading to a celestial palace in the clouds. Floating effortlessly, he explains that this place is a key gateway to the coveted upper realm, and in just a few months, a dimensional rift called the Ascension Gates is scheduled to open right where they are standing. Because this event happens only once every 1,000 years, countless high-level cultivators and spiritual beings are already gathering to make their ascension. He logically concludes that with so many powerful beings gathering, it's hardly surprising that some would appear near their location. Director Kim, still confused, points out that the other cultivators claimed they were taking his colleagues to join their sects, not to ascend immediately, and raises a valid point. If the cultivators are ascending to the upper realm, how can his mortal colleagues possibly join them? The Sea Dragon King dismissively replies that such concepts are likely difficult for mere mortals to comprehend. He then reveals a magical vase, explaining a cultivator technique used to shrink and store large objects inside such artifacts. He clarifies that the other sects have likely stored their entire headquarters inside these items, planning a mass ascension. To prove his point, he reveals that he himself has packed an entire undersea castle, along with 1,800 dormant sea dragons, inside his own small vase. Yoon-hyun and Director Kim are left utterly speechless by the sheer scale of the power being described. Turning his attention back to the unconscious woman, the Sea Dragon King notes her peculiar and intriguing potential, musing that she could become extraordinary if she were to join the Sea Dragon clan. But as he moves to take her, a panicked Director Kim yells for him to wait, shouting out, "Miss O!" For his insolence, he is slammed to his knees by an invisible, crushing force. The immense spiritual pressure overwhelms him, and he grunts in agony. The Sea Dragon King, now holding the unconscious woman, declares that he will give her his blood and accept her as his kin, stating it's for the best. Before departing, he decides to offer one last piece of advice to the remaining mortals. With a menacing glow in his eyes, he warns them not to casually ask questions of high-level cultivators. To emphasize his point, the crushing pressure is now applied to Eunhyun as well, forcing him to the ground in pain alongside Director Kim. The king states that he only answered their questions out of generosity, but he chillingly informs them that most other cultivators would have killed them on the spot for the mere act of asking. With his message delivered, the sky erupts with lightning as he prepares to leave. He then transforms into a magnificent, colossal blue dragon and ascends into the stormy sky. As the skies clear, their remaining female colleague states the grim reality. All of their talented co-workers have been kidnapped, and laments their surreal situation, from the sudden avalanche to the appearance of these immortals. Overwhelmed by the chaos, she breaks down into a desperate laugh, unable to process the abduction of her colleagues by immortals and dragons. Seeing her distress, Yunyan gently pats her on the back, offering a small gesture of comfort. She turns to him, pleading with him not to be taken as well. She tearfully admits that if he's taken too, she won't be able to survive alone in this hostile forest. Yunhyun calmly looks on, however, and cryptically states that, unfortunately, their time is up. His colleague is shocked and confused by his ominous words. Suddenly, she collapses, crying out that something is coming as an immense pressure bears down on her. Just then, a strange, elderly man riding a mechanical lion beast appears, wondering aloud how mere mortals manage to get into the path to ascension. He chuckles to himself, deducing they must have been caught in a spatial storm from the unstable gate and praising his own genius. He floats down, demanding to know which of the mortals just emitted such a massive wave of consciousness. The presence was so powerful he thought a sage from the upper realm had descended, and his gaze immediately falls upon the trembling female colleague. A terrified Director Kim tries to protect his colleague, asking the strange man who he is. Without a word, the master casually flings the director through the air with an invisible force. Yun screams out for Director Kim as he is sent flying helplessly across the clearing. Yin manages to dive and break his fall, earning a grateful thank you from his shaken colleague. The director then notices that Yun's back is horribly shredded from the impact, but our protagonist insists he's okay. Meanwhile, the old master approaches the girl, offering to take her in and awaken her spiritual root, intrigued by the potential of her strange consciousness. Crying, the young woman looks back at her injured friends, unwilling to abandon them. The master scoffs, questioning if she's really clinging to worldly attachments after he has offered to take her in. To prove his point, he uses his power to lift both Yunyan and Director Kim into the air and begins to choke them. She screams for him to stop, begging him to spare them and promising to do anything he asks, while the master declares he will sever her ties himself. He then demands that she forget all her worldly ties, and through her tears, she reluctantly agrees. Satisfied, the master releases Yunyan and Director Kim, dropping them unceremoniously to the ground. Deciding their presence will only prevent her from letting go, he declares he will return them to a nearby mortal nation, and opens a chaotic dimensional rift, admitting that not even he knows where they'll end up. As the portal's vortex pulls them in, Yunyan's last thought is to grab the vital herbs he had gathered. Their colleague can only watch in horror, screaming Yunyan's name as he and the director are consumed by the swirling portal. The sounds of a bustling market suddenly fill the air, with vendors hawking the finest silks and newly arrived scriptures. The sounds of a bustling market suddenly fill the air, with vendors hawking the finest silks and newly arrived scriptures. Yunyan and Director Kim lie unconscious on the stone floor of what appears to be a back alley. Yunyan is the first to slowly regain consciousness, confused by his new surroundings. He sits up and looks out into a busy street, wondering where on earth they've landed. He realizes that in his previous life, he never ended up in a place like this, while the townspeople eye him as if he's a lunatic. As he gets to his feet, he acknowledges that the immortal was telling the truth about their destination being random, and yet, the path feels strangely familiar. Shielding his eyes from the sun, a stunning realization dawns on him. This is the place he once lived in. His back bloodied and torn, he stares at the city skyline, recognizing it as Seokyung City, the capital of Yanggwol. Yunyan and Director Kim find themselves in the bustling capital city of Seokyung, a place our protagonist recognizes from his past life. They quickly find cover in an alley, where a disoriented Director Kim admits he can't keep up with the whirlwind of events. Yunyan agrees, while Kim wishes it were all just a dream as they both take a moment to process their situation. Director Kim then expresses a sliver of relief that at least they weren't taken by those monsters who abducted their colleagues. When asked what they should do now, Yunyan cryptically replies that he doesn't know, hiding his foreknowledge, and reflects on his past life, where he was nothing more than a powerless herb gatherer, a fate he is now determined to change. Deciding they can't hide forever, he suggests they leave the alleyway, and the director readily agrees. Once back out in the open, Director Kim notices people whispering and staring, wondering why they're drawing so much attention. Yunyan startles him by revealing that the locals are actually mocking their modern clothes. Brushing off the director's concern, he coolly states that he knows a bit of Chinese, his movements subtly revealing his bloodied back from the previous encounter. A surprised Director Kim stammers in relief, still completely unaware of the full extent of his companion's past life knowledge. Internally, however, Yun admits that he lied. The language is completely different from Chinese, despite using similar characters. He then recalls the humiliating 2 months he had to spend as a beggar in his past life just to learn the basics. Now armed with that knowledge, he confidently proposes getting new clothes, baffling the director who wonders how they could possibly pay for anything. Yun simply leads them to a medicine hall, ready to execute the first step of his plan. Inside, the medicine hall owner is ecstatic, marveling at the precious herbs our protagonist has brought to sell. Using his past knowledge, he correctly identifies them as 800-year-old yellow bamboo roots, and the owner eagerly values them at a hefty 15 silver ingots. Yun is inwardly shocked by the sum of fortune he never could have imagined in his previous impoverished life. Barely containing his excitement, he tells the owner to hurry with the payment, and the delighted man rushes to comply. With their newfound wealth, Yun promptly purchases a large house, leaving Director Kim utterly stunned at their sudden change in fortune. Now dressed in local attire, Yun tells a grateful Director Kim that he will teach him the language of this world. He calculates their remaining funds, noting that after bribing officials for identity plaques and buying the expensive house, they only have 1 silver ingot left. The director looks on, still trying to process the rapid change in their circumstances. He then suggests they drop the formal titles and call each other by name, to which Yun readily agrees. For the first time, his companion formally thanks Seo Yun by his full name, strengthening the bond between them. Later, Yun explains that their money came from selling the herbs he had gathered, and points out that once the herbs are gone, their income will dry up, so they need to find a new way to make money. Director Kim wonders what they should do, and he proposes that they start a business with the silver they have left. At this, our guy believes that with the director's business acumen and their remaining funds, they can make a decent living. However, he isn't satisfied with simply making a living. Having regressed, he intends to dream much, much bigger. He recalls a crucial piece of information from his past life. Director Kim is a martial genius. In the previous timeline, the man had become a martial master in just a few months after reading some third-rate books. And once he learned more advanced techniques, he eventually became one of the most powerful martial artists in the entire Zhonghu. So he begins to scheme, wondering what would have happened if the director had learned advanced martial arts from the very beginning, and realizes he could accelerate the birth of the Zhonghu's greatest swordsman by at least 30 years. With this plan in mind, our protagonist is determined to benefit as much as possible while aiding the future martial legend. He begins his manipulation, suggesting that in a world of martial arts like Muram, they'll need a way to defend themselves and their future business from Zhonghu gangs. Director Kim is intrigued by the idea but questions how they could possibly learn martial arts when sects don't teach outsiders. Yun smirks, knowing that as a well-known Muram novel nerd, the director would be hooked on the idea. He then lays out the power structure of the city, explaining the 4 stars and the 3 demons, the 7 most famous sects. He details the orthodox sects, starting with the demon-slaying sect, which specializes in sword and blade techniques, and the Buddhist self-binding temple. He continues, describing the information-brokering suppressing birdhouse and the versatile 7 mysteries sect. Finally, he touches on the unorthodox 3 demons, who are known for their illegal activities, stealth, and sorcery. When asked which sect he likes best, the director enthusiastically declares his preference for the demon-slaying sect. He passionately proclaims that a true martial artist must wield a sword, and that a man must learn blade techniques. Yun internally notes that this choice is fitting for the man who is destined to become the best swordsman in his past life. When the director asks how he knows so much, he lies, claiming he simply eavesdropped on some martial artist earlier. 3 months later, Yun and Director Kim arrive at the gate of the demon-slaying sect. Yun tells the guards that he and his older brother have come from afar, wishing to learn the sect's famous martial arts. A muscular guard scrutinizes the pair, looking thoroughly unimpressed, and dismisses them, stating that while they look wealthy, learning martial arts at the director's age would be far too difficult. Undeterred, Yun smoothly requests to speak with someone of higher status, offering a silver coin as a bribe. The bribe works, and soon they are brought before a manager to discuss learning martial arts for self-defense. Yun then opens a chest full of silver ingots, asking the manager to teach them the best techniques available. The manager's greed is immediately piqued, and he agrees to let them join as external disciples. However, he clarifies that the donation earns no special treatment and that they will only accept one of them, much to Yun's internal frustration. Director Kim is about to explode in anger at what he perceives as a ripoff. But Yun quickly cuts him off, graciously thanking the manager and declaring that his brothers will be the one to learn. The manager happily takes the money and instructs them to meet with the other external disciples outside. Once outside, a confused Director Kim asks what good it is if only he learns, lamenting the exorbitant cost. Yun reassures him, saying he was never good at sports anyway and that he will focus on supporting him by setting up a business. The director, feeling the immense pressure, reluctantly agrees to try his best. But he expresses uncertainty, doubting his ability due to his age, but Yun encourages him, telling him to believe in himself. With renewed, if hesitant, determination, Director Kim thanks his friend as they stand before the vast sect grounds. 7 months later, a competition is being held within the demon-slaying sect. The sect leader sits in shock, questioning what he is witnessing. Before him, yet another of his disciples falls, joining the ranks of those already defeated on the ground. The entire demon-slaying sect is in an uproar as its leader realizes that a single outsider has just defeated all of his beloved disciples. To master a martial art, one must physically attune themselves to its true meaning. A third-rate warrior can advance to second-rate by merging their own understanding with the art, while advancing further requires even more time and effort. A lesson the direct disciples of the demon-slaying sect learn as they gang up on an outsider. However, some prodigies with immense talent seem to mock the very idea of typical progression. These talented individuals, like Director Kim, can speed through many stages of mastery all at once. The demon-slaying sect, the greatest sect in Seokyeong City, is supposed to be filled with such talented martial artists. And yet, an outsider has just single-handedly defeated all of the sect's direct disciples. In a mere 7 months, Director Kim had become a first-rate warrior, completely mastering the sect's absolute dragon saber technique. The sect leader is enraged, knowing that reaching first-rate status in half a year is a feat that should require the collaborative efforts of many skilled artists. He fumes that because an outsider accomplished this, it makes the sect's long tradition look like a sham. Believing his sect has been disgraced, he orders Director Kim's immediate capture. Following their leader's command, disciples swarm the sect grounds to apprehend the outlier. Yun observes the chaos, noting that the entire sect has been turned upside down simply because an outsider mastered their techniques in a mere 7 months. As a result, Director Kim was imprisoned in his quarters, suspected of being a spy from a rival sect. Yun, bewildered, recalls how he was also arrested at the market and thrown in with the director, despite knowing no martial arts whatsoever. While Eun worries, an unconcerned Director Kim simply continues to practice his swordplay, laughing off their imprisonment, and warns him that accused spies often have their chi core destroyed, but the director remains completely unfazed. Director Kim agrees with the danger, but he seems to have other, more pressing priorities. He then excitedly declares that he's approaching the next wall and believes he can advance to a new stage if he can just break through. Yun is stunned by the director's monstrous talent, realizing he's already aiming for the next level right after becoming a first-rate artist. He knows that the next stage, martial peak, is the level of sect leaders and absolute masters, with only 1,000 such individuals in the entire nation. Since the martial arts world doesn't mention a stage beyond it, martial peak is considered the final, ultimate level of attainment. Yun realizes his assumptions were wrong. At this rate, the birth of the world's greatest swordsman won't just be sped up by 30 years, but by 40. 7 days pass while they remain confined to their quarters. After a week of meditation, Director Kim is suddenly surrounded by 3 ethereal flowers of chi, signaling a major breakthrough. He then exhales a breath of pure energy, his training having reached a new pinnacle. Yun watches in utter shock, recognizing the legendary 3 flowers gather at the summit, a phenomenon that only appears for those at the peak of martial arts. Director Kim rises, confidently announcing that he has crossed the barrier and no longer fears the leader of the demon-slaying sect. Yun can only mutter a single word, completely floored that the director's talent has far exceeded even his wildest imagination. Meanwhile, Director Kim, impressed with himself, muses that his childhood love for martial arts novels must have been a sign of his hidden talent. Their moment is interrupted as a group of sect members arrives, calling for Young-hoon and his comrade. An elder reads from a scroll, declaring they have orders from the sect leader to destroy the chi core of the spy who stole their martial arts. But Director Kim simply scoffs at the heavy-handed decree. As the disciples close in, Yun frantically tries to explain that they are not spies and that it's all a misunderstanding. The elder silences him with a blow, claiming they were overheard speaking in a code-like language, and orders their restraint. But before he can act, Director Kim moves with impossible speed, effortlessly disarming him. The elder cries out in agony as his hand is slashed. Having made his first move against them, Director Kim laments that this was the very first sect he had ever joined. A furious disciple charges forward, enraged by his defiance. With the fluid grace of a peak master, he effortlessly incapacitates all the disciples sent to capture him. The surviving members flee in terror, screaming that he's a peak-level martial artist and that they must inform the sect leader immediately. With the room cleared of enemies, Director Kim tells Yoonyeon he plans to visit other sects to train, then asks what his plans are. Bruised, he wipes blood from his mouth and declares that he will accompany him, suggesting they head to the unorthodox dragon-fighting stronghold. Director Kim agrees, promising to deal with the demon-slaying sect's leaders while Eunhyun heads there first. The scene shifts to the mountainous terrain where the dragon-fighting stronghold is located. Director Kim, his sword now bloodied, stands atop a cliff and good-naturedly asks a trailing Yoonyeon what took him so long. A winded Yoonyeon struggles to climb up, panting that the newly empowered director is just too fast for him. Blood still drips from the director's blade, a testament to his recent battles. Yoonyeon reflects internally that this world changes people, noting that the once gentle director no longer calls him out for his own violent tendencies. Looking at their new base, he wistfully thinks how great it would be if they could just return to their normal lives on Earth. As he continues his climb, his thoughts reveal a deep longing to return to Earth, wondering if he'll ever get the chance to regress again. However, he snaps out of his thoughts, telling himself that it can't be helped and that they must do what they can to survive in this new world. After being betrayed by the demon-slaying sect, Director Kim swiftly conquered and took over the dragon-fighting stronghold. Over the next 2 years, he and Yoonyeon toured the nation of Yangguo, challenging and defeating various other sects. In their 3rd year, he completed his conquest by destroying the emblems of every sect in the land. His overwhelming power earned him the title of the greatest martial artist under the heavens, and he used this fame to unite the sects into the martial alliance. 7 years later, Yoonyeon and Director Kim had become as close as brothers, their age gap forgotten. Director Kim, now the alliance leader, even created a martial art specifically for Yoonyeon, presenting him with a book titled The Severing Mountain Sword, and explains that if Yoonyeon masters this technique, he too can reach the level of martial peak. Yoonyeon recognizes that this technique is a true first-rate martial art, far beyond any second- or third-rate arts he has ever seen. However, despite having the perfect technique and the best teacher in the world, there was a major problem. An utterly exasperated Director Kim lightly whacks Yoonhyun, who is training with a wooden stick. Just then, our guy bluntly tells his friend that he has absolutely no talent for martial arts, a truth that crushes his spirit. Even with the world's greatest martial artist as his personal tutor, our protagonist barely managed to become a third-rate warrior after a full year. Resigned to his fate, he gets back up, reasoning that at least he has some talent in medicine. The story jumps to a day 10 years later, when Yoonyeon witnessed a legendary event. He peeks in on a now-aged Director Kim, who is meditating while surrounded by an incredible aura of 5 floating energy orbs, and immediately recognizes this as the legendary state beyond martial peak. 5 energies converge to the origin. As the power surges, the elderly director's body begins to glow, and his form starts to transform. A brilliant flash of light engulfs the room, knocking over everything and sending Yoonyeon skidding backward. When the light fades, a shocked Yoonyeon looks up at a completely changed figure and stammers his friend's name, Young-hoon? A youthful, long-haired, and powerfully built man smirks down at him, exuding an overwhelming aura. The transformed Director Kim asks what has him so surprised, revealing his new, youthful form achieved through the legendary process of skeletal restructuring. A newly de-aged Young-hoon marvels at his own youth, laughing as he feels invigorated and full of life. Seo Eunhyun remarks that the world would be shocked by his skeletal restructuring, a sentiment with which the martial arts master readily agrees. He then laments the lack of a worthy successor for the martial alliance, complaining that despite their skills, none of his disciples truly understand martial arts. Yoonyeon skillfully flatters his friend, dismissing the other martial artists and calling him the only true genius in the world. Despite Yoonyeon's words, however, Young-hoon looks over his training disciples and declares that there is simply nobody worthy to take his place. 15 years pass, revealing the grand headquarters of the now well-established martial alliance. In his second regression timeline, an elderly Seo Yoonyeon reflects that 35 years have now passed since he first arrived on the ascension path. Now in his mid-60s, he finds himself alone, wondering what his old friend Young-hoon has been doing all this time. He recalls how Young-hoon passed on his leadership role and left just a year after his transformation, seeking new challenges, and reflects that while he wished to retire with him, he was forced to remain as the Alliance's strategist to maintain order. Sadly, his friend, who claimed he wanted to travel, didn't even attend the retirement ceremony. Finally retired, he lets out a sigh as he walks through the courtyard of his new home. Looking over the vast manor he bought with his retirement funds, he feels a deep sense of loneliness, finding it far too big to live in alone. Suddenly, he's startled by a noise in his garden and calls out, demanding to know who's there. To his utter astonishment, the figure that emerges from the garden is none other than his long-lost friend Young-hoon. Rushing to his side, Yoon frantically asks what happened and why he missed the ceremony, but his friend is breathless and exhausted. Without a word, the peerless martial master collapses onto the lawn, leaving Eun to cry out his name in alarm. Lying on the grass, Young-hoon begins his story, stating that he always believed he was blessed with an unparalleled gift in martial arts. Yoon wholeheartedly agrees, reassuring his friend that if he isn't a genius, then no one is. Young-hoon acknowledges his own talent, confidently stating that no ordinary mortal could ever hope to match his martial skill. Yoon chuckles, questioning the term ordinary mortal, and reminding his friend that he is universally acknowledged as the strongest man under the heavens. But the mood shifts as Young-hoon drops a bombshell. He fought a cultivator and asks Yoon if he remembers those beings. He flashes back to the terrifying memory of the flying monsters who kidnapped their co-workers 35 years prior. The memory of those beings, the cultivators, comes rushing back to our guy with a dawning sense of dread. He recalls what he knows of them, secretive beings who lurk in the shadows of Yangguo's royal palace, manipulating the entire country from behind the scenes. As the martial alliance's influence grew to rival the state, the cultivators inevitably began to extend their control over them as well. Young-hoon had no choice but to follow their orders, as defying them meant opposing the nation and endangering the alliance he built. To free himself from these constraints, he gave up his position as alliance leader to hunt down and duel the cultivators as an individual. Lying on the ground, Young-hoon recounts how incredibly difficult the elusive cultivators were to find. Even when he did locate one, they would dismiss him as a mere mortal unworthy of a fight, using illusions or simply flying away to avoid a confrontation. But 5 years ago, he finally cornered one for a duel. When Eun eagerly asks if he won, Young-hoon confirms that he did. Yoon breathes a sigh of relief, joking that it's a good thing his friend waited until after he was no longer the alliance leader to pick such a fight. But Young-hoon's expression turns grim as he reveals the context of his so-called victory. He had to put his entire life on the line to fight a cultivator who had only reached the chi-building stage. And the result of that life-or-death struggle was merely a small cut on his opponent's fingertip, a revelation that leaves Eun utterly stunned. He explains that he only won because the cultivator had arrogantly declared that suffering even a single scratch would count as his loss. Trying to process the massive power gap, Yoon asks if this chi-building stage is an elite rank, perhaps like one of the 10 strongest cultivators. But Young-hoon shatters that hope, explaining that chi-building is the second lowest stage of cultivation, akin to a mere second-rate martial artist. The sheer absurdity of the power difference leaves Yoon speechless, his worldview completely shattered. In his mind, Yoon acknowledges that while he always knew cultivators were powerful, he had truly believed his friend's martial arts had reached the absolute peak of mortal potential. After all, the man could defy gravity, walking on air and unleashing techniques while suspended in the sky. His power was so immense that he could slice through entire buildings in steel as if they were made of tofu. And yet, this peerless genius, after a life-or-death battle, had barely managed to scratch the finger of a bottom-tier cultivator. Young-hoon bitterly calls himself a frog in the well, realizing that mortals cannot face cultivators, who are nothing less than living natural disasters. As Yoon listens to the devastating account, his own face is a mask of grim, shaken silence. But clenching his fist, Young-hoon reveals that he isn't finished with his tale of defeat. With grim determination, he reveals that in his fight today, he actually succeeded in cutting off his opponent's hand. Just as Yoon begins to celebrate this incredible feat, however, Young-hoon crushes his hope by explaining the cultivator simply slapped on a paper talisman and grew the hand right back. Declaring that he has reached the absolute limit of martial arts, Young-hoon tells a kneeling Eun that he is here to say goodbye. The cultivator, impressed by his willpower, offered to accept him into his sect, forcing Young-hoon to start his journey for power all over again from the bottom. Yoon is baffled, questioning how this is possible since, as they both know, one cannot become a cultivator without a spiritual root. Young-hoon then reveals a crucial piece of information. For a mortal, achieving the martial stage of 5 energies converging to the origin is equivalent to possessing the 5-element spiritual root that cultivators are born with. He laments the cosmic unfairness of it all, that mortals must dedicate their entire lives just to manifest the basic quality that cultivators are simply born with. As he finishes his explanation, a strange, dark energy begins to swirl around his sword and his body. He then declares his intent to leave, preparing to depart on a new path to aim for a higher stage of existence. As a final parting gesture, he hands Yoon a scroll, calling it his last gift before wishing him well and turning to leave. Yoon desperately calls out his friend's name, but Young-hoon vanishes into a plume of dark smoke, leaving him behind. Our guy looks down at the gift, a book titled Record of Transcending Cultivation and Exhausting Martial Arts, a chronicle of Young-hoon's failed attempt to surpass cultivation through martial arts alone. Clutching the book, a tearful he asks the empty air where his friend is going without him. And so, more time passed in the wake of Young-hoon's departure. Decades later, an ancient dying Seo Yun lies in bed, blood trickling from his mouth as he mutters how cruel it all is. He realizes with bitter irony that after 50 years in this world, having achieved fame and wealth, he is once again dying of a common cold, just as he did in his previous life. It seems that no matter what he does, he is bound by a singular, inescapable force, fate. Lying on his deathbed, he concludes that no human can escape their destiny. The only things he changed is the house and the bed he will die in, as he is fated to perish on the very same day. He reflects that he lived this second life to its absolute limits, so consumed with his goals that he never even considered marriage, all to avoid the regrets of his past. Through his efforts, he helped unite the martial sects and experienced all the fame and wealth a mortal could possibly desire. Yet, all he feels is a profound sense of emptiness, wondering with tears in his eyes if they could have truly reached the sky, if only they had struggled harder together. In his final moments, his body quakes not from illness but from the crushing sense of powerlessness and bitter disappointment. With a final dying breath, Seo Yun's story concludes, marking the end of his second failed regression. Seo Yun's eyes snap open as he's pulled back into his third life, beginning his second regression. He awakens in the all-too-familiar forest, recognizing it as the ascension path, the start and end of his every life. Feeling his body brimming with youthful energy once more, he confirms that his regression ability is not a one-time phenomenon. But before he can even process his situation, an enraged Jeon Myung-hoon charges at him, screaming profanities. With the muscle memory of a seasoned fighter, our protagonist effortlessly dodges the clumsy punch, much to the other man's shock. As he sidesteps another attack, he internally questions the purpose behind his recurring regression. While a fresh start with an energized body seems like a good thing, a dark thought crosses his mind. He laments the loss of the 50 years of power and relationships he had painstakingly built in his previous life. Meanwhile, a breathless and furious Myung-hoon accuses him of almost getting them all killed before having the audacity to dodge his attack. Effortlessly subduing his former bully, he concludes that this endless cycle of regression is not a good thing at all. With cold clarity, he realizes his ability is a curse, one that strips his life of any real meaning. As Myung-hoon continues his futile struggle, he considers that if this cycle continues forever, it is a truly terrifying fate. He then grimly envisions himself trapped on fate's wheel, forced to wallow in suffering until the end of time, and the most painful realization is that he can never again meet the people he grew to care for, like the version of Young-hoon he knew as a brother. He looks at his colleagues and sees only empty shells, people with the same faces, but none of their shared history. While Director Kim restrains the fuming man, our guy accepts that the person he knew as Young-hoon no longer exists in this world. Calmly taking charge, he tells Section Chief Jeon to cool his head, reminding everyone that Myung-hoon was the one driving. He icily points out that he had warned him about being sleep-deprived due to the extra work he'd been forced to do. Dismissing any blame, he tells everyone to stop pointing fingers and start thinking about how to survive. Jeon is left seething in silence, completely shut down by Eun-hoon's unassailable logic. Catching himself before he calls the director Young-hoon, he tells Director Kim that he will search for a safe place for them to stay. He then instructs the rest of the group to look for their car or a way out of the forest. As he walks off alone, he promises to light a signal fire for everyone to gather at once the sun sets. Now by himself, he bleakly wonders if there is any point in making new bonds when he is destined to be alone in the end. He quickly finds a suitable cave and gets a fire going just as night begins to fall. Later, the utterly exhausted group rests around the campfire inside the safety of the cave. Lying awake, he is gripped by the fear of his unending regression and resolves that this ability must be removed, and theorizes that returning to Earth might break the curse, since he always regresses to this exact spot on the ascension path. Yet, with a deep sigh, he's faced with the fundamental question, how does he actually get home? He recalls the words of the Divine Soul Immortal Sect Master, who once explained that spatial storms caused by the Ascension Gate's opening could trap ordinary humans. Suddenly, it all clicks. The Ascension Gate is not only how they arrived here, but it might also be their only way back to their original world. Clenching his fist with new determination, he knows he must first become stronger, as an ordinary mortal can achieve nothing. So he decides that he must follow in Young-hoon's footsteps from his past life and become a powerful cultivator. He reasons that with the extended lifespan of a cultivator, he will have more than enough time to properly research the gate. With his goal now crystal clear, he stands under the moonlight and vows to become a cultivator and reach the Ascension Gate. The next morning, he wastes no time and begins his plan. After consuming a yellow bamboo root, he feels powerful quakes of chi forming in his core. He recalls that these roots were useless in his first life, but now, he possesses the dragon vine chi method that Young Hoon specifically created for him. With this advanced technique, he is confident he can finally break through his body's blocked chi passageways. And with that, a surge of energy rushes through his system, beginning the arduous process of cultivating his modern, non-martial body. Breathing heavily, he notes how difficult it is to purify a body accustomed to fast food and the stresses of modern life. After meditating, he finds a sturdy branch and begins sharpening it into a crude wooden sword. With his practice weapon complete, he prepares to retrain his body. He begins to practice his swordsmanship, his movements already showing the grace and power from his previous life, and reflects that while he was a decent martial artist in his last life, his skills have dulled from disuse near the end. He then approaches a thick tree, ready to test his current limits. He channels his energy and unleashes the powerful severing mountain swords technique. The wooden stick cuts deep into the tree, proving to him that since he already possesses the knowledge, regaining his power is just a matter of time. Having witnessed the incredible feat, Director Kim stumbles forward in absolute disbelief. He rushes up to him, breathlessly asking how he managed to slash a tree with a mere wooden stick. Our protagonist casually leans against the damaged tree, recognizing that the director is the key to his own journey of cultivation. With a sly smile, he offers to teach Director Kim the very technique he just witnessed. The director's face lights up with pure excitement at the prospect of learning such a powerful martial art. However, their lesson is cut short by a terrifying cackle as massive claws tear through the earth nearby. The Lord of the Forest reveals itself, snarling at the filthy humans in its domain. The giant beast looms over them, enraged that they dare to play around in front of the master of the forest. While Director Kim freezes in terror, Yun curses himself, realizing he had been so focused on his new plan that he'd completely forgotten about this imminent threat. The flashback to his second regression continues, with blood splattering through the trees in the aftermath of the gruesome sacrifice. Ignoring the excruciating pain, he calmly applies pressure to his nerves to manage the agony. He grimly accepts his own powerlessness, acknowledging his weakness in his first, second, and now his third life. Back in the present, his shocked colleagues, including a frantic Director Kim, rush toward him, stunned by his sudden act. He boldly approaches the Lord of the Forest. In his previous life, he had vowed before the Great Fox to attain the legendary level of 5 energies converge to the origin and become a cultivator. But he reflects on his past failure, admitting that even after a century of training under the best master, he had barely reached the level of a first-rate martial artist. Knowing his talent is worthless in this world, he made a desperate choice and tore off his own arm as a sacrifice. His horrified colleagues can only scream as they witness him sever his own limb. Holding up his sacrifice, he vows with chilling resolve that no matter how many millennia it takes, he will not give up. His face, splattered with his own blood, is a mask of pure, unyielding determination. The Lord of the Forest is amused, acknowledging that this human knows proper manners by offering a sacrifice of his own accord. As the fox spirit looms over him to claim its prize, our protagonist declares that he'll offer his arm any time, until the day he finally gathers the strength to surpass the beast itself. After devouring the arm, the satisfied fox leaves, granting them a period of safety in its territory. Wasting no time, the now one-armed Yun begins relentlessly practicing his swordsmanship alone in the forest. He recalls how the cultivators eventually arrived. They healed his arm, but also took his talented co-workers away. Yet despite the major events unfolding, he continued to swing his sword day and night without rest or food. On the 4th day, his solitary training is interrupted by the Sea Dragon King, whom he boldly confronts with a question. The powerful Sea Dragon King, Seo Hueol, is intrigued by the mortal's audacity and asks what he wants. Yun shrewdly questions why the king would take deputy manager. Oh, a mortal without a spiritual root and with a limited lifespan. The Sea Dragon King explains that once she accepts his blood, she will awaken a spiritual root perfectly suited to her talents. Seizing the opportunity, he asks for the same chance, arguing that he and the others from his world might also possess hidden powers. The Sea Dragon King simply smiles, finding the mortal's plea amusing. With a mere exertion of his aura, he puts the young man in his place, warning the mortal for his own good. He condescendingly advises him against making demands of high-rank cultivators who have seen countless millennia. Calling himself one of the kinder cultivators, he warns him that others would crush him like an insect for far less. And as the king departs, the sky erupts in a storm of lightning. Director Kim can only stare in disbelief as the king reveals his true form, a massive blue dragon soaring through the clouds. A few days later, Yun questions another cultivator, the Divine Soul Immortal Sect Master, about taking yet another co-worker who also lacks a spiritual root. the master reveals a priceless pill that can awaken a mortal's spiritual senses, giving them a chance to become a cultivator. This information is a revelation. He now knows there are other ways to become a cultivator without being born special. The master confirms that while martial arts training can also lead to a spiritual route, it is a long and mediocre path compared to his pill. His business concluded, the cultivator dismissively opens a portal, banishing both Eun-yeon and Director Kim. As they are sucked into the vortex, their colleague cries out for them in despair. Our protagonist awakens from the teleportation to find himself dangling unceremoniously from a tree branch. From his vantage point, he immediately recognizes his location as the southwest region of Yangguo. He recalls traveling this exact land with Young-hoon, the transformed Director Kim, in his second regression after they were first teleported. Knowing the area like the back of his hand after spending a century there, he wakes up the still unconscious Director Kim. After a brief explanation, the confused director soon accepts their strange new reality. Using his future knowledge, they travel to Hobiark City and sell the herbs from the Ascension Path to buy a small house. Eun-yeon then begins teaching Director Kim the local language and the Severing Mountain Blade, a technique the director himself would create in the future of Eun-yeon's second life. But as he watches his friend train, he feels a sense of demotivation, knowing the director's talent is on another level entirely. His friend's genius is undeniable, as he reaches the advanced level of 3 flowers within a mere 3 months of training. Eun-yeon privately laments that it took him 2 entire lifetimes just to reach the first-rate level, a feat the director eclipsed in mere months. Feeling his newfound power, a cheerful Director Kim jokes that he could probably defeat him in a fight now. But Eun-yeon reflects that this naive version of his friend is not the same battle-hardened Young-hoon he considered a brother. Realizing their vast difference in mental age and experience, he decides he shouldn't accompany the director in this life. He hands his friend a martial arts manual and abruptly states that from now on, they must live separately. A bewildered Director Kim panics, asking for the reason and worrying that he did something wrong. Eun-hyun, however, thinks back on the true, heartbreaking reason for his decision. He recalls how in his previous lives, Young-hoon became the powerful martial alliance leader, only to fall into despair after being defeated by cultivators. In the second regression, his friend even created new techniques to fight cultivators, but still fell short. Ultimately, Young-hoon was unable to surpass them and abandoned his martial path to become a cultivator, disappearing from his life. Eun-yeon concludes that the same tragedy will unfold again, and he no longer wishes to witness his friend's face filled with despair. Instead, he gives a simpler reason, claiming he wants to travel and improve his own skills, which leaves the director worried about being left alone. Our guy reassures him that his martial arts are already at a peak level, and that with the communication skills he's been taught, he will be fine on his own. Still, the director is crestfallen, saddened by the thought of parting with the only person who shares his homeland. As a compromise, Eun-yeon smiles and suggests they promise to meet at this very house every 2 years. With his friend convinced, he leaves their shared home to embark on his own solitary path to power. His journey begins at the Hall of 8 Respects, where a guard immediately halts his approach. Now dressed as a martial artist, he formally greets the guard and announces his purpose, to request a duel. The guards erupt in laughter, mocking the stranger for having the audacity to simply barge in and demand a duel. But before the guard can finish his sentence, Eun-yeon draws his sword with incredible speed, vowing to himself that he will grow stronger. The guard is left in stunned silence as the blade of his formidable polearm is effortlessly sliced in two. With his face shrouded in shadow, our protagonist holds his sword at the ready and asks, "Do I still seem like a nobody?" His face is then revealed, burning with conviction as he vows to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals. He arrives at the grand and orthodox Hall of 8 Respects. A guide welcomes him, informing him that the sect leader is already waiting for his challenge. He follows the guide down a long, ornate hallway, stepping towards the impending duel. Eun-yeon then emerges into a large training courtyard where the sect leader awaits him, observed by numerous disciples. The disciples of the Hall of 8 Respects watch in silence as the mysterious challenger prepares to face their master. The Hall of 8 Respects' sect leader expresses his surprise, noting that the rumored first-rate martial artist is just a young lad. Eun-yeon, however, formally greets him, while the leader acknowledges his formidable chi and shows proper martial respect. Returning the compliment, he humbly asks the sect leader to bestow upon him some teachings through a duel. In response, the sect leader wordlessly readies his signature weapon, a deadly 3-sectional staff. As the two masters circle each other, the sect leader declares his intent to make the first move. He lunges forward, his staff whipping through the air in a devastating arc. Facing the incoming strike, our guy stands his ground, preparing to parry the attack with his sword. With a sharp clang of steel, he effortlessly deflects the powerful blow. An observing disciple shouts in disbelief, shocked that Yunyun could parry the leader's formidable nunchucks with only his sword. From that single exchange, the sect leader correctly assesses that his opponent is at the late stage of a first-rate warrior and has achieved perfect unity with his weapon. He then calls our guy a true genius for having reached a level equal to his own at such a young age. However, Yunyun just smirks, privately scoffing at the compliment of being called a genius. He openly muses that while his prowess might seem impressive for his age, it is hardly a compliment to him, and humbly states that he is just a talentless fool, as the heavens never blessed him with innate ability. He internally reflects that his power isn't from talent, but from the opportunity that regression provides, allowing him to match geniuses through sheer experience. Agreeing to get serious, he declares he will now use sword energy, prompting the sect leader to ready himself for the real fight. Yunyun immediately unleashes the first form of the mountain-severing sword art, Transcending Peaks. The sect leader is forced onto the defensive, narrowly dodging the powerful sword technique. Without giving him a moment to breathe, Yunyun flows through his second and third forms, entering Mountain and Ascending Vein. Channeling his own energy, the sect leader's eyes glow, as he desperately parries the relentless barrage, and cries out in frustration, unable to find any opening in the monstrous and unfamiliar sword art. Yunyun's aggressive assault begins to break through the leader's defenses. He continues to press his advantage, moving on to the seventh form of his sword art, Deep Mountain. The attack is so swift it grazes the sect leader's ear, drawing first blood. The disciples watch in horror, realizing that the challenger's sword is impossibly becoming faster with each subsequent form. The leader is sent stumbling back as Yunyun unleashes the 11th form, Cliff Edge. A disciple astutely notes that it isn't just speed, the sword is also gaining a ridiculous amount of force. The sect leader grunts in exertion, his hands trembling as he struggles to withstand the sheer power of Yunyun's attacks. Sensing victory is near, Yunyun coolly announces that he will end things now. Just then, he leaps high into the air, preparing to execute the powerful 12th form, Seven Lights Emerging Peak. A brilliant flash of light erupts from his sword as he brings down the final, decisive blow. The sect leader's treasured three-sectional staff shatters on impact, leaving the disciples speechless. Disarmed and utterly defeated, the sect leader kneels on the broken ground and concedes his loss. His point proven, Yunyun gives a respectful bow, thanking the leader for the opportunity to fight. He then calmly walks away from the decimated training ground, leaving the stunned sect in his wake. As he departs the grand halls of the Orthodox sect, Yunyun reflects on the outcome. He notes that because the Hall of Eight Respects follows a strict moral code, there's no fear of backlash after his victory. Having successfully challenged an Orthodox sect, he decides his next stop should be one of the unorthodox sects, and reaffirms his goal. Through this tour of duels, he will forge his path to the martial peak in this life. A quick montage shows he continuing his tour of Seogyung, winning some duels and losing others as he owns his skills. His journey finally leads him to the gates of the infamous unorthodox Hojang sect. Inside, the story quickly jumps to Yunyun soundly defeating the Hojang sect's dueling representative. The defeated martial artist is sent crashing to the floor in a decisive loss. Lying on the ground in agony, the defeated man can only groan in pain. The Hojang sect master cheerfully greets Yunyun, identifying him as the young martial artist who has been challenging duels all over the city. Yunyun remains polite, acknowledging that he learned much from the bout and has seen the master's skills as well. But then, dropping his friendly facade, the master reveals the next stage, a 10-on-1 fight against the sect's elders. Yunyun questions the absurd arrangement, stating that he has never heard of a victorious challenger being forced into a consecutive 10-on-1 duel. The master gives a sinister laugh, mocking him by saying, "Well, you've heard of it now, haven't you?" Enraged, Yunyun threatens to expose the sect's devious ways, which would surely bring their name to ruin. However, the master coldly outlines their plan. They will claim that he died from an infected scratch sustained during the duel, and smugly elaborates that they will put on a show of mourning, convincing everyone that Yunyun's death was an unfortunate accident despite their best efforts. As his men draw their swords, he chillingly concludes that a dead man can't possibly refute their version of events. Completely surrounded, Yunyun can only grimace, realizing the depravity of the Hojang sect is even greater than he had imagined. The sect's master declares that killing him here and now is the only way to keep their reputation intact. However, our protagonist smirks, realizing this life-or-death confrontation is exactly the kind of real combat experience he came for. Unsheathing his sword, he boldly accepts their ridiculous duel, challenging the entire group to attack. And so, he leaps into the fray, ready to gain some real fighting experience against the 10 ruthless elders. Meanwhile, in a lively restaurant in Seokyung City, the sounds of chatter and celebration fill the air. A patron gossips with his friend, mentioning he'd heard a young martial artist had foolishly gone to challenge the Hojung sect. His companion clicks his tongue, pitying the talented fellow for challenging an unorthodox sect, a move seen as a guaranteed death wish. An older man nearby wisely comments on the naivete of youth who believe the world will simply bend to their will. The consensus among the patrons is that the arrogant young warrior hastened his own death and is likely already buried by the bandits of the Hojung sect. Just then, the restaurant's doorman stammers out a shocked and uncertain welcome to an unexpected guest. Covered in blood and breathing heavily, a battle-worn Seo Yun stumbles in and calmly orders a bowl of noodles. The terrified worker can only manage a stuttered invitation for the fearsome warrior to come inside. The entire restaurant falls into a stunned silence as all eyes fixate on the blood-soaked man who just defied all their expectations. As he sits down, he silently curses the crazy men from the sect, admitting to himself that he genuinely almost died. He recalls the impossible odds, a 10-on-1 fight where his opponents had even poisoned their weapons. Surveying the bloody aftermath in his memory, he knows he only survived thanks to his past/knowledge of medicine, which allowed him to create a life-saving pill beforehand. He remembers the Hojung sect master's desperate scream, ordering his men to kill him no matter what it took. As a last resort, the master unleashed all the sect's lackeys, who charged at him in a full-scale military formation. In that moment, he had to fight like a cornered animal, driven by a pure will to survive. Back in the restaurant, despite his near-death experience, a sense of grim satisfaction washes over him as he thinks, "I survived." The flashback shows the brutal end of the battle, with him standing victorious over a sea of bodies and the dead sect master. He had been utterly ruthless, crippling any survivors by cutting their tendons to ensure they could never seek revenge. Now, his bloody hand reaches for his chopsticks, the ordeal finally over. The stimulants he took are still coursing through his veins, and he realizes with a sigh that he won't be able to sleep for days. Yet, despite the brutal toll of the fight, his mind is already on the next step, challenging an orthodox sect to a duel. After his fight, he simply ate a bowl of noodles and immediately continued on his journey for strength. Word of his ridiculous feat spread like wildfire, and gossip about the mysterious warrior echoed throughout Seokyeong City. Soon, the people gave the seemingly crazed martial artist a title that perfectly captured his relentless nature. He became known far and wide as the Infinite Fighting Spirit, Seo Yun. But even with his growing reputation, he knows the truth. He lacks talent, and the martial peak feels as distant as ever. This cruel reality only hardens his resolve to continue fighting, weaving through life and death to inch ever closer to his goal. And adopts a new philosophy: for a talentless man to succeed, he must go mad, embracing insanity just to have a hope of catching up to a genius. And so, he traveled across Yangguo, fighting several duels a day against anyone and everyone. 5 years pass in this relentless pursuit of strength. The ground itself trembles from the force of his training. He unleashes his Severing Mountain Sword's 14th form, T-Mountain, Flowing Heart. It is a powerful sword art that channels the stability of a mountain and the vastness of the heavens. He strains to use sword chi in the form of silk, an advanced technique of peak masters that puts an incredible burden on his mind. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he pushes himself, knowing he must master this level of power if he ever hopes to catch up to Young-hoon. His training partner, Kim Young-hoon, leaps into the air for a powerful blow. With a single explosive strike, Young-hoon's power clashes with his blade. The protagonist is thrown back, his sword ki completely shattered by his friend's overwhelming strength. Young-hoon emerges from the dust, noting that while he had high hopes, the infinite fighting spirit still has a long way to go. Now the strongest man under the heavens, he smiles, declaring his victory in their spar. Struggling to his feet, our guy can only offer a bitter congratulations, acknowledging his friend's incredible innate talent. He is crushed by the ever-widening gap, realizing Young-hoon achieved skeletal restructuring in only 5 years. He then trembles in frustration, lamenting that in the same amount of time, he has remained a mere first-rate martial artist. The stark difference in their progress makes him reflect on how the concept of talent can bring a person to their lowest point. As Young-hoon pays him an unexpected visit, our guy wonders why he broke their agreement to meet only once every 2 years. Young-hoon explains that after visiting all the great sects in the land, he has come to a realization. He confidently declares that he is now the strongest man in all of Yangguo, with no one able to withstand even a single one of his strikes. Having reached the pinnacle, he tells a stoic Yun that he has been thinking about his next move. He then offers him a high-ranking seat in a new sect he plans to create, but Yun bluntly refuses, stating he prefers his current solitary path. He sees this for what it is: Young-hoon's obsession with becoming an alliance leader, and knows that accepting would mean being relegated to a strategist role once again. As Young-hoon continues to try and persuade him, our protagonist reaffirms that every second is precious to his own goal of reaching the martial peak. He firmly shuts down the offer, thinking to himself that he has had more than enough of his friend's lessons from their past life. Clutching his sword, he knows that what he truly needs now is not tutelage, but the brutal education of real-life combat. He is merely following the advice Young-hoon gave him in their past life, to gain as much real combat experience as possible. In this lifetime, he decides to forge his own path and simply watch his friend's saga unfold from a distance. Choosing his own brutal journey over his friend's grand ambitions, he turns and walks away. And so, another 20 years passed in his solitary quest for battle. Young-hoon finds a much older, more weathered Eun-hyun, observing that he seems quite pale. After a lifetime of relentless but ultimately futile struggle, the aged and scarred man looks up, finally ready to admit the truth he has long denied, that his talent is truly and irrevocably one forsaken by the heavens. Young-hoon questions why Eun-hyun's prowess hasn't increased despite his endless training. Eun-hyun laments that while his understanding of sword energy exceeds other first-rate artists, he still can't last more than 3 exchanges against a peak-level master. Young-hoon finds this strange, as Eun-hyun should have reached the martial peak by now. He muses that someone with such vast fighting experience should have easily broken through. But Eun-hyun grimly accepts his fate, admitting that this is the extent of his talent, and acknowledges his talent forsaken by the heavens, a reality that has haunted him through multiple lives. Still, he clings to a sliver of hope, believing that if he can just maintain his sword energy for an entire day, he might find a path forward. As a parting gift, Young-hoon gives him a book, wishing him the best on his journey. He explains that the book contains the insights he gained just from surviving an encounter with a core formation stage cultivator. Eun-hyun is stunned, realizing that just escaping such a powerful being required this much insight, recorded in a book as thick as an advanced martial arts manual. Young-hoon goes on to describe cultivators as living natural disasters, emphasizing the profound understanding needed to survive their wrath. Grateful, Eun-hyun promises to preserve the knowledge and pass it down to the next generation. Then, Young-hoon announces his intention to seek out another cultivator, praying they both survive to meet again. As a final hint, he advises him to reach the martial peak by training his mind to take in every single piece of spatial information at all times. Eun-hyun repeats the baffling advice, questioning what every piece of spatial information even means. Young-hoon elaborates, telling him to make his combat awareness, the ability to utilize his surroundings, a constant, active state. The thought terrifies Eun-hyun. Just maintaining sword energy gives him a headache, and now he has to simulate his surroundings constantly. Though doubting his own sanity, he trusts the strongest martial artist and steels his resolve, believing there must be a reason for this impossible task. And so, from that day forward, he begins his hellish training, forcing himself to be aware of every visual detail and remember the position of every object. He walks through bustling city streets, his senses quickly becoming overwhelmed by the constant influx of information. His training continues in the wild, where his perception blurs as he processes the countless details of the forest. After 5 years of maintaining sword energy and spatial tracking, a completely exhausted Eun-hyun stumbles through the forest. He admits to himself that being constantly aware of everything in sight is a dizzying, nauseating experience. The training only escalates as he begins to incorporate and track audible information alongside the visual, pushing his senses even further. Overwhelmed and having run out of sects to challenge, he wonders if he can even fight properly in his current state. For 30 years, he has traveled all of Yangguo, visiting and defeating every sect until none were left to challenge. Now, he resorts to hunting bandits, living off their bounties just to sustain his grueling training regimen. In his lightheaded state, he questions if he can even survive fighting such dirty, underhanded enemies. Just as he thinks this, a group of bandits seeking revenge ambushes him. Their leader, armed with 2 swords, declares his intent to kill him. Resigned, Eun-hyun prepares for battle, knowing that even if he dies, he must continue down this agonizing path. Soon, the forest echoes with the sounds of battle and the screams of the fallen bandits. 15 years later, an aged and scarred Eun-hyun looks up, remarking, "So you survived." A smiling Young-hoon, also bearing new scars, confirms that he has indeed survived his perilous encounters. 45 years have now passed since his regression. Our guy explains that his sensory training is finally complete, having mastered sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell to an advanced level. But as he stares into his tea, he admits with a heavy heart that this is all he has achieved. Despite 45 years of unimaginable torment and training, he still hasn't become a peak-level martial artist. The failure gnaws at him, a constant, frustrating reminder of his limitations. Meanwhile, Young-hoon recounts his own recent battle, where he was ambushed by 2 core formation stage cultivators who had put a bounty on him. While he barely escaped, he managed to scratch one of them, gaining what Eun-Yun assumes is another great insight. But Young-hoon dismisses the idea, stating soberly that it's impossible to defeat such cultivators. Escape is the only option. And reveals his new grim conclusion: reaching the stage of 5 energies converging to the origin may be the absolute limit for a martial artist. He suspects the legendary author of The Record of Gazing Cultivation reached the same conclusion: no matter how hard one trains, a martial artist can never defeat a cultivator. Listening to his friend's despair, Yin-Yun sees his own reflection in Young-hoon's struggle. He reflects on the irony: Young-hoon has talent gifted by the heavens, while he himself has talent forsaken by them, and wonders why he, the talentless one, can relate so deeply to the despair of a genius when they are polar opposites. Stumped, he admits he has no idea why, despite having the vision and energy of a peak artist, he still can't become one. To find out, Young-hoon offers a duel to provide feedback, an offer Eun-hoon readily accepts. The duel ends in an instant. Eun-yun is thrown back, screaming in frustration, "Just what is the problem?" Young-hoon is equally confused, stating that by all rights, Eun-hoon should have become a peak-level martial artist ages ago. The confirmation of his inexplicable failure sends the protagonist into shock, unable to comprehend why he can't break through his limits. Pondering the mystery, Young-hoon suggests that perhaps what he lacks is a catalyst, and explains that a catalyst is a strong sense of drive or an emotional event that could push him beyond his concentration and talent. The suggestion enrages Eun-yun, who explodes with the pent-up frustration of a 50-year struggle. "How much more desperate can I get?" he screams, tears streaming down his face as he recounts his lifelong struggle to escape being a mere first-rate artist. He details then his torturous training, activating all his chi, sleeping with his sword, and even processing information in his dreams. Broken and defeated, he collapses to the ground, screaming at the heavens, "Why won't you show me the next stage?" It is the pathetic sight of a 70-year-old man cursing his fate, and his despair is absolute. Having pursued the sword his entire life, he sobs, admitting he doesn't have a single clue what the next stage even looks like. Young-hoon can only silently watch his friend's complete mental breakdown. After a moment, he turns away, his body crackling with energy. Then, in a flash, he carves a new martial art into a nearby tree, one created during their duel specifically to fill in Eun-yun's weak points. Reading the names Mountain Lord Martial Arts and Transcending Peak Steps, Eun-hoon realizes Young-hoon has vanished once again. 5 years later, an even older Eun-yun stands within the walls of a peaceful-looking compound. 50 years have now passed since his regression, and the old man, nearing the end of his life, sighs with resignation. He wonders aloud if Young-hoon has already passed away, concluding that this must be their shared, inescapable fate. He accepts their limitations, stating that his talent ends here, and Young-hoon's talent ended there. But just as he laments that mortals can't escape the fate set by the skies, Young-hoon appears behind him, questioning his words. Eun-yun is shocked to see his friend horrifically injured, his arms missing, and his body racked with dark energy. The old master rushes to his friend's side, ready to fetch his medical tools. But Young-hoon grabs him, leaping into the air with impossible speed. In midair, Eun-yun is bewildered, wondering how his friend can move like this when both of his arms have been chopped off. Young-hoon shouts that a powerful cultivator is chasing them, the price, he says, for blowing up the arm of a core formation stage master. Despite his grave injuries, he laughs maniacally, proud that he managed to inflict meaningful damage on such a powerful being, and declares with crazed joy that he has witnessed the stage past the 5 energies converging, the final stage a martial artist was thought to be able to reach. Eun-yun can only stare in utter disbelief at his friend's insane, game-changing revelation. Just then, Young-hoon prepares to demonstrate his ultimate technique and declares that he risked everything, even burning his own life force, to reach this new pinnacle of power. Eun-yun stares in disbelief, recognizing the incredible power as the legendary enhanced chi. His master reveals that with this new power, he was able to destroy the arm of a core formation cultivator before unleashing it on their surroundings. And so, the ball of enhanced chi completely obliterates the large building that was once Eun-yun's home. Surveying the destruction, a proud Young-hoon tells his disciple that this is the culmination of his entire life's work in martial arts. Eun-yun, however, can only look on in devastation, numbly realizing that his hard-earned house is gone. He laments that the house, into which he had poured 50 years of savings, was destroyed in an instant. His master, manic with excitement, explains that he rushed all this way just to show him this power, as he plans to leave his will and legacy to him. Eun-yun recalls having to suppress his initial rage at his house being destroyed just to properly witness his master's final martial performance. The powerful technique had completely erased the three-storied building from existence. He then grimly reflects that it was a good thing no servants were present, as hundreds would have died from that single attack. Analyzing the debris, he deduces that the enhanced chi was a devastating concentration of thousands of blade energies, and marvels at the unbelievable power, stronger than anything his master had ever shown him. Young-hoon explains that while he once had to rely on ambushes, he can now fight cultivators head-on with this newfound strength. But having expended the last of his energy, the mortally wounded master and his disciple plummet from the sky. They crash into the forest below, the impact shaking the very ground. As he lies dying, Young-hoon implores him not to forget the techniques he has just witnessed. With his last words, he begs his disciple to pass on his life's work in martial arts to future generations. A distraught Yun tells him to stop talking, desperately trying to save his life. However, their tragic moment is interrupted by a sinister cultivator, Yomho, who declares he's found the ultimate martial spirit. He then contemptuously calls Yun a mere civilian and demands he abandon the body of the so-called criminal. Ignoring the insult, our guy calmly asks if he is here to punish him. At this, the cultivator asks if he is an acquaintance of that criminal. Then, without waiting for an answer, he hoists his friend's body onto his back and flees. Yomho scoffs at the pointless escape, amused that the old man would even try to run. Deciding to make a game of it, he summons a dark power and encourages Yun to run for his life. As he runs, Yun looks back in shock and horror at what his pursuer has summoned. A horde of grotesque, reanimated corpses. Jiangxi rises from the ground, their eyes glowing with malevolent energy. Cursing his old body, he is forced into a desperate chase, pursued by the undead army. While fleeing, he asks his dying master if the cultivators were the ones who gave him the title Ultimate Martial Spirit. He finds a moment of dark humor in the absurd situation, noting how strange it is for two legendary spirits to be chased by zombies. But he quickly snaps out of it, desperately pleading with the unresponsive Young-hoon to stay awake. One of the relentless Jiangxi lunges forward, rapidly closing the distance. But our guy is ready, and with a single swing of his sword, he severs the zombie's head. He then violently kicks the Jiangxi's severed body away, yet the horde remains in hot pursuit. Gasping for breath, he complains that their roles should be reversed, lamenting how his master's severed arms prevent him from helping. Despite the desperate situation, the Jiangxi continue their relentless chase, forcing him to grit his teeth and keep running. The hellish pursuit lasts for what seems like an eternity, as day turns to night and back again multiple times. Utterly exhausted, our protagonist is pushed to the absolute limits of his physical endurance. After 3 days, he finds himself cornered at the edge of a high cliff, his escape route cut off by the horde. Yomho reappears, mockingly impressed that a mere civilian survived being chased by Jiangxi for 3 days and nights. However, he declares that it is all futile. As there is nowhere left for him to run, the ultimate martial spirit is already dead. At this, our guy confirms that, as a physician, he knows his master has already passed away. Yomho questions why he ran so desperately, revealing he only wanted the corpse and didn't care about him. In response to the cultivator's question, a broken and weary laugh escapes Unyon's lips. Yomho is visibly annoyed, demanding to know why his cornered prey is laughing. Drawing his sword, Yun recites the names of the techniques he learned, admitting he only got this far thanks to his master's teachings, and explains that the man is his mentor and a friend from his hometown. Filled with a final surge of defiance, he stands to protect his master's honor, declaring that Yomho must go through him first. Yomho's expression turns cold and menacing in the face of such unwavering loyalty. The cultivator wonders aloud if mortals have forgotten how to fear them, whether from ignorance or the folly of old age. Promising to demonstrate a pain worse than death, he decides to teach Unyon a brutal lesson. With his power, he moves the 2 severed zombie hands, but not toward our guy. Unyon is startled, confused by the cultivator's strange actions. A horrifying realization then dawns on him as he understands he was never the target. To his absolute terror, the corpse of his master, Kim Young-hoon, begins to twitch and move. The reanimated body of the ultimate martial spirit slowly lurches to its feet, now a puppet for the cultivator. Sneering at the scene, Yomho vows to make the parasite pay the price for looking down on a cultivator. Filled with rage and despair, Yun can only curse the evil bastard for his despicable act. In the ultimate act of cruelty, Yomho commands the zombified Kim Young-hoon to turn on his loyal student and kill his own disciple. Under the cultivator's control, the reanimated corpse of Kim Young-hoon lets out an inhuman roar, now a monstrous Jiangxi, and lunges forward with terrifying speed and power. Filled with righteous fury, Yun confronts the smug cultivator Yomho, demanding to know how he dares to defile a dead man's legacy. As the fight begins, he analyzes the attack, relieved that the Jiangshi is only using brute force and lacks his master's actual martial arts skill. However, the sheer power and speed infused into the corpse by the cultivator prove overwhelming for his aged body to withstand. Frustration mounts as he desperately parries the relentless assault, cursing the impossible situation he is in. He considers it an incredible disgrace to point his sword at his already dead master, but sees no other choice. With a heavy heart, our protagonist apologizes to his fallen friend, resolving to end this mockery as quickly as possible. And so, he prepares to unleash his ultimate technique, the Severing Mountain Sword's 21st form, Heavenly Lake. The scene shifts to a flashback, revealing a conversation between a younger Yunyun and Young-hoon about the sword forms. Yunyun asks his master why the final form is named after a lake when all the others relate to mountains, peaks, or valleys. His master is momentarily puzzled, unaware that in a past timeline, he himself had created this very technique for Yunyun. Relaxing after a spar, Young-hoon muses that Heavenly Lakes reminds him of the famous lake atop Mount Baekdu from their original world, Korea. He then laughs, wondering if this world has a similar landmark or if other transplanted Koreans were the ones who named it. Yunyun reflects on the bittersweet memory, simply agreeing with his friend. Returning to the present battle, the technique's philosophy is explained. It is named for a lake that reflects the sky itself. Our guy explains that in his teachings, the sky symbolizes the opponent, while the lake refers to a single strike, which is meant to encompass the entire view of his opponent. The Heavenly Lake technique works, sending the powerful Jiangshi flying backward from the force of the energy. The move works by absorbing the opponent's energy into his sword for a brief moment before repelling them. And he knows this is a move only he can perform, as it was designed for his unique mastery of chi veins as a first-rate physician. Yet he realizes that to truly end this, he must leave not a single piece of Young-hoon's corpse intact for the cultivator to ever use again. Drawing on the energy within his sheath, he prepares to combine all of the Severing Mountain Sword's forms into one final continuous attack. He begins his devastating combo with the first form, Transcending Peaks. Without pause, he flows through the next 5 forms, unleashing a torrent of sword strikes. The ground itself is torn asunder by the sheer force of his multi-form sword art. The reanimated corpse is viciously sliced and diced by the relentless flurry of attacks. With cold determination, he vows to cut the body up so completely that his master's legacy can never be defiled again. Enraged by this defiance, Yomho screams, "You insect!" and channels even more power into his puppet. Young-hoon's corpse grotesquely mutates, swelling into a monstrous brute with overwhelming demonic energy. Young-hoon realizes with dread that the Jiangshi is now even faster and stronger, and his only option is to dodge. However, accepting his own imminent death, he decides dodging is pointless and prepares for a final suicidal gambit. He plants his feet, ready to sacrifice his life to ensure his master's body is no longer defiled. Ignoring the incoming death blow, he channels all his remaining life force into one final, world-burning attack. As the monstrous fist descends, he calmly accepts that he will die in this clash. But in a final act of sheer will, he refuses to perish just yet, pushing himself to hold on for just a little longer, and focuses all his senses to their breaking point, absorbing every sensation, the sounds, smells, and the taste of his own blood. Feeling his brain about to explode from the strain, he decides to let it, pushing past all mortal limits. With a final, desperate scream, he overloads his mind and body, his eyes blazing with newfound power. He embraces the agony, determined to push himself until his very brain burns to a crisp. Under the impossible pressure, a fundamental barrier within him finally cracks. His eyes fly open in shock as he experiences a profound and sudden transformation. Instead of shattering, his consciousness, pushed to the absolute brink, transcends its limits and surpasses something. A strange lightness fills him as he wonders if he's become delusional in his final moments. Suddenly, his perception of the world shifts, and he sees with a clarity he has never known. The world slows to a crawl, and he can perceive the trajectory of the monstrous hand with ease. With newfound grace, he effortlessly dodges the attack that was previously too fast to even see. Yunyun looks at his sword, now glowing with a brilliant blue aura, signifying a new level of power. The very air seems to hum with the energy emanating from his blade. In a single fluid motion, he strikes, severing the Jiangshi's arm and head in one clean cut. Our guy stares in disbelief, realizing he has finally attained the vision of a martial artist who has reached the legendary martial peak. To his utter astonishment, the severed head of his master's corpse wears a proud, satisfied smile. He then poignantly reflects on their opposite fates. Young-hoon, the talent blessed by the heavens, and himself, the one who was forsaken. He understands now that their bond was forged in a shared, lifelong struggle to escape the destiny forced upon them. With his newfound power, he lands a flurry of strikes in one attack, hacking away at the remains until nothing is left, and concludes that in the end, there was no genius or dunce. Only two men who fought against fate, one now properly dead and the other on death's door. Just then, a vision of Young-hoon appears, asking him, "Are you going to stop there?" Spurred on by his master's memory, Yoon-yun defiantly shouts, "Of course not." He leaps into the air one last time, unleashing the powerful 15th form of his sword art. The final technique is unleashed, Layered Mountain. The resulting explosion obliterates the entire landscape, and as it does, Yoon-yun accepts that his end has come. The cultivator Yomho can only scream in impotent rage as everything is wiped out. As his life fades, he finds peace, knowing that his master's corpse can no longer be defiled. With a final, content smile, he wishes his martial arts master to rest in peace. Having finally attained the level of martial arts he had desired for so long, Seo Yoon-yun puts an end to this life of struggle, and with his death, his fourth regression is complete, setting the stage for his current life. Seo Yoon-yun's eye snaps open as he realizes he has entered his fourth regression. Lying on the grass, he confirms his suspicion. He has regressed again, recalling how he fought until the very last moment in his previous life. He clenches his fist, remembering that in that final moment, he had finally attained the power he'd been chasing for so long. Overwhelmed with emotion, he screams in triumph, exclaiming that he has finally reached the martial peak. However, his inner celebration is cut short by an angry shout. An irate Jeon Myung-hoon confronts him, blaming the crazy bastard for their current predicament. As the man approaches, our protagonist's vision suddenly sharpens, and he realizes with a shock, "I can see it." Myung-hoon is stunned as Young-yun effortlessly dodges his slap, questioning how he could possibly be dodging. With his eyes closed, Young-yun calmly notes that he can perfectly see where Jeon Myung-hoon will strike next, and reflects that while he could dodge Myung-hoon before based purely on experience, this new ability feels completely different. As a red line traces his opponent's next move, our guy understands that this isn't just prediction, it's genuine foresight. He then recalls from a past life how peak-level masters could see the trajectory of attacks, making it impossible for lesser martial artists to even stand a chance. Then, his eyes glow blue as he realizes that this time, he can also see the path for his own attacks. He instinctively senses that the blue lines radiating from his opponent are showing him the best openings and trajectories for his counterattacks. Yoon-yun now fully understands his power. Red lines to read enemy attacks, and blue lines to execute the most optimal counter. He theorizes that because the power gap between him and Myung-hoon is so vast, he's able to see an overwhelming number of openings. Just then, a drop of blood trickles from his nose, catching him completely off guard. He clutches his head in agony as his brain feels like it's burning up, and he wonders if the vision is causing an overload. Yet, despite the excruciating pain, he effortlessly intercepts another one of Myung-hoon's enraged punches. And with a single, swift chop to the neck, he incapacitates his furious section chief. Their colleagues can only watch in shock as section chief Jeon collapses, knocked out cold by a single blow. Yoon-yun clutches his own head, trying to recover from the intense pain caused by his newfound vision. His colleagues approach cautiously, and one woman asks if he is all right. Our guy takes a breath, amazed at how painful it was to use the vision for such a short time, and wonders what the problem could be. After calming his coworkers down, our protagonist surveys the scene, having restored a semblance of order. Just as he has done in previous lives, he leads them to a safe cave and prepares some fruit over a fire. Once his colleagues are asleep around the fire, he slips out into the night to begin his training. He picks up a sturdy tree branch to use as a makeshift weapon. With a swift swing, he perfectly slices a falling leaf in two, and marvels at his own ability, realizing he sliced a leaf with a dull branch without using any chi whatsoever. He then begins to analyze his new ability, concluding that the vision of martial peak predicts the opponent's movements, which his brain then processes as red and blue lines, and understands that with this vision, he can read all of an opponent's moves and simultaneously aim for their weaknesses using the most optimal movements. He finally understands why his master, Kim Young-hoon, referred to the memory of all five senses as a way to manually replicate a peak martial artist's vision. Now he realizes that his master was forcing him to enhance his senses in order to manually calculate an opponent's trajectories, a feat his vision now performs automatically. As he watches his vision track countless falling leaves, he acknowledges just how incredible the vision of martial peak truly is. He then visualizes the falling leaves as though he were fighting multiple opponents. In his mind's eye, he flawlessly cuts down these imaginary foes with perfect precision. His mental training allows him to strike vital points with deadly accuracy. As dawn breaks, an exhausted but satisfied Yoon-yun lets out a breath. Huffing and puffing, he can't help but smile, feeling that he's finally on the right path. and is content that he has finally reached the proper martial peak. However, the intense training has also left him with a splitting headache, making it feel as if his brain is about to be fried to a crisp. Fortunately, after finding 8 yellow bamboo roots and performing the dragon vein chi method, he finds he is now able to maintain the vision for up to 3 hours. He also realizes that with his new prowess, he no longer needs to sell precious roots for money, since he can handle finances with his own abilities now. With that settled, he returns to the cave where his colleagues are still sleeping. He looks down at the sleeping Director Kim, his most important ally, and reflects on the 6 volumes of Kim Young-hoon's findings, along with his final teachings, all of which are stored in his memory. He resolves to transfer this knowledge to the current Director Kim, confident that it will make this life's version of him surpass all previous ones. Now that he has reached the martial peak himself, he knows the teachings he can receive from his master will far exceed those of his past life. While he has no clue how to reach the next stage of power, he knows there's only one thing us so-called idiots like him can do. His path is clear: train endlessly to maintain his vision and allow his brain to grow accustomed to the strain. His first goal in this new life is to resolve the burning pain he experiences when using his powerful vision, and his ultimate goal is to finally attain the fabled level of the 3 flowers gathering at the summit. Stepping out of the cave at dawn, he is more determined than ever to reach the very pinnacle of the martial peak, a state known as the 3 flowers gathering at the summit. As morning dawns, he begins reliving the events of his previous life, but this time he does so with his powerful martial peak vision. Just as before, the Lord of the Forest appears, and as our protagonist prepares to offer his arm, he wonders how his new ability will perceive such a powerful being. Activating his martial peak vision, he focuses on the spirit beast, questioning if his foresight will finally reveal any weaknesses. But as his vision activates, instead of seeing clear lines of attack and defense, the world is flooded with an overwhelming pressure. The sheer power of the Lord of the Forest paints his entire vision red, signifying an absolute, unwinnable fight. He grits his teeth as the fox takes his arm, his vision only confirming the futility of resistance against such an entity. Clutching his severed arm, he's baffled. His martial peak vision, which should reveal openings, showed him nothing but a sea of red. A few days later, when the powerful cultivators arrive just as he remembers, he decides to test his vision on them as well. To his dismay, his vision reveals the very same result. The cultivators are surrounded by an impenetrable red aura, signifying that they too are foes he cannot possibly defeat. So he is forced to accept a terrifying truth: even at the martial peak, a martial artist has absolutely no openings against even the lowest level cultivators, and realizes that a martial peak master would still be utterly helpless against a chi-refining cultivator, confirming the harsh lesson from his previous life. The next day, after his colleagues are taken, our protagonist confronts the enigmatic Sea Dragon King, Seo Hoyle, seeking answers. Adopting a humble demeanor, he formally asks him about the strange red aura he observed around the cultivators. The Sea Dragon King looks down with an amused smile, intrigued by the mortal's line of questioning. Our guy goes on to describe the red spheres he saw surrounding the cultivators, hoping the powerful being can shed some light on the phenomenon. The Sea Dragon King chuckles, explaining that what he saw is a special ability of cultivators known as divine consciousness, and elaborates that while a mortal's consciousness is confined to their brain, a cultivator's expands to engulf their entire surroundings. After confirming that he too possesses this ability, he dismisses the topic, leaving our protagonist to absorb the new information. Nearby, Director Kim is left completely baffled, as he couldn't understand the entire conversation, which was held in a foreign tongue. Shortly after the Sea Dragon King departs, the hunchbacked master from the Divine Soul Immortal sect appears, just as he did in the past. Following the familiar script, the master takes the remaining female colleague and disposes of both Eunyeon and Director Kim by throwing them into a spatial rift. The duo plummets through the rift, but this time, their destination is different from what he remembers. Instead of the treetops from his past experience, he is shocked to find himself plunging into a large body of water. Wringing out his shirt on the shore, he curses the unpredictability of their new location, a significant deviation from his memory. Taking stock of their surroundings, he stands over the unconscious Director Kim on a sandy beach. When Director Kim asks where they are, our guy replies, somewhere completely different. However, using his memories from past lives, he quickly identifies their location as Chickenhead Lake in Yongguo, noting that Changho City is nearby. Director Kim despairs at their isolation, wondering how they'll survive with no one around to ask for help. Yun, however, quickly spots what appear to be buildings across the vast lake. Declaring that he'll swim over to get clothes and food, he dives into the water, leaving a stunned Director Kim behind. At this, Director Kim can only grumble in frustration. What did we squeeze the water out of our clothes for then? As our guy swims across the lake, his mind races, accessing memories from a life he once lived in this very area. He recognizes the settlement as a bandit's den, a place he recalls having wiped out in a previous life. And he remembers the specifics, a first-rate leader and vice leader, with the rest being nothing more than second or third-rate small fry. In that life, because of their sheer numbers, he had to resort to stealth and a poisoned sword to take them down. Meanwhile, on the shore, the bandit vice leader spots the lone figure swimming towards them, wondering what on earth he's seeing. The bandits laugh at the fools who just swam to their den, threateningly telling him to get lost if he doesn't want to die. Unfazed, our protagonist calmly wades out of the water, ignoring their taunts completely. Losing his patience, one of the bandits rushes forward, swinging a club at the unresponsive intruder. With a simple, fluid motion, Yun disarms the attacker and sends him flying. The onlooking bandits are left speechless at the sudden and effortless display of power. Picking up the fallen club, he gives it a test swing, deeming it a suitable weapon for what's to come. He then walks towards the now cautious group, nonchalantly asking one of them how many people he's killed. One large, boisterous bandit proudly roars that he's killed 50 people as he charges forward with a spiked mace. But in a flash, before he can even react, our guy severs his head. The remaining bandits freeze in terror, realizing the man before them is on a completely different level. With a cold expression, our guy prepares to deliver his ultimatum, and issues a chilling challenge. Anyone who has ever taken a life should come at him now. Inside the main hall, the rest of the bandits remain oblivious, drinking and carousing with their captives. One of the boorish bandits roughly harasses a bound female captive. Suddenly, the revelry is interrupted when one of the bandits notices a disturbance at the entrance. The party comes to a dead stop as Yun appears silhouetted in the doorway holding the bloody, severed head of their vice leader. The bandit leader, lounging on his tiger-skin throne, furiously orders his men to grab their weapons and deal with the intruder. In an instant, the entire room draws their weapons, ready to swarm the lone man who dared to challenge them. Raising his simple, blood-soaked club, our protagonist coldly informs them that he has no questions. They are all simply going to die. The scene cuts to the aftermath, where the entire bandit encampment is now littered with bodies. The bandit leader, now defeated and terrified, grovels for his life, realizing he's facing a legendary peak master. Yun calmly steps through the carnage, walking towards him. He casually asks the leader how long the massacre took, to which the trembling man stammers that it has been about 15 minutes. Our guy reflects on the stark difference. In his previous life, this same task took him an entire day. He recalls the painstaking strategy of setting fires, retreating, and then picking them off one by one with a poisoned sword. But now, thanks to his new power, he accomplished the same feat in a mere 15 minutes with nothing but a simple wooden club. As the bandit leader makes a last-ditch effort to save himself by offering up his hidden treasure, our protagonist coldly tells him to die. With a final, merciless strike, he ends the bandit leader's life. "I already know where it is, from the last time I was here," he mutters, his foreknowledge making the bandit's plea pointless. He then proceeds to the treasure room, easily unlocking it as if he has been there before. After looting the bandit's hoard, he is met by the freed captives, who bow in profound gratitude for their rescue. Yun turns to leave, his expression unreadable after the swift and brutal slaughter. Just then, an elderly captive calls out, begging to know the name of their savior so they can repay the debt. He pauses, considering what title to give himself in this new, more powerful life. With a confident smirk, he declares his title, one he earned through bloodshed in a past life, Infinite Fighting Spirit. After annihilating the bandits, Yun and Kim use their newfound wealth to settle into a manor in Changho City. Under Yun's tutelage, Young-hoon begins his formal training in both martial arts and literacy. And in an astonishingly short period of just 2 months, Young-hoon's innate genius allows him to reach the legendary realm of Three Flowers Gather at the summit. Eun can only observe his friend's monstrous growth, noting with a sense of dejection how much faster he is progressing this time around, and reflects on the disparity of talent, where some struggle for a lifetime, while prodigies like his friend can leapfrog to the pinnacle of martial arts. Our protagonist wryly congratulates his friend for reaching a legendary martial realm before he has even fully mastered reading. Young-hoon himself is pleasantly surprised, admitting that he never realized he possessed such immense martial talent. Yun realizes he's never had a true, evenly matched duel with Young-hoon, as his friend was always simply guiding him during their sparring sessions. Gripping his sword, he wonders if his own attainment of the martial peak can finally stand against his friend's Three Flowers realm. And so, he formally challenges Young-hoon to a duel. His friend cheerfully accepts, believing he finally has a chance to defeat his master. The duel begins, with both men unleashing powerful techniques from the Severing Mountain Sword style, but Young-hoon effortlessly counters with the Severing Leyline Blade, a testament to his newfound power. Their peerless techniques clash, sending shockwaves of blue and red energy ripping through the forest. Through his martial peak vision, Yun sees his optimal paths being overwhelmed by Young-hoon's raw power, forcing him onto the defensive. However, he calculates that if he continues only to dodge, he will inevitably be cornered and defeated. Yet, a fierce desire to win something he hasn't felt in a long time begins to boil within his heart. He comes to a stark realization. This is the very last chance he will have in this life to defeat the prodigy, Kim Young-hoon, because he knows that after this duel, his friend's growth will accelerate to a speed he can't even dream of matching. Seizing the moment, he resolves that this is his final opportunity to claim victory before his friend surpasses him forever. Determined to win by any means, he prepares to use a hidden trick up his sleeve. He unleashes his full power, using decades of combat experience to throw 2 daggers as a diversion. The feint works, forcing Young-hoon to parry the daggers and creating a crucial opening in his defense. Having successfully disrupted his opponent's rhythm, Yun closes the distance, pressing his advantage. Relying on his vast combat experience, he charges forward, confident that he can overwhelm the less seasoned Young-hoon. He then unleashes another powerful technique, but his friend is ready to counter. Unfazed, Young-hoon calmly declares that he will now show Yun the true power of the Three Flowers stage. Suddenly, all of Unyan's senses begin screaming, warning him of an immense and imminent danger. Young-hoon channels his power, gathering a terrifying amount of enhanced blade chi into his sword. And with a powerful shout, he unleashes a devastating wave of energy that carves a path through the earth. Yun-hyun's instincts scream at him that a direct clash would result in his complete obliteration. However, with a confident smirk, he prepares to meet the attack with a special technique of his own. He unleashes the Severing Mountain Sword's ultimate move, Echoing Valley, an art created by the genius Young-hoon from a previous lifetime. The two ultimate techniques collide, resulting in a cataclysmic explosion that rocks the entire forest. Emerging from the dust, Young-hoon seems impressed by his friend's incredible counter. Yun, however, is shocked that his attack, which was designed to shatter his opponent's weapon, was completely withstood, and as Young-hoon's sword shatters from the strain, he concedes defeat. He acknowledges his friend's exceptional experience and declares Yun the victor due to his broken weapon. Yun somberly accepts the loss, knowing that he will never again be able to defeat his friend, and resigns himself to the fact that his chance for victory over Kim Young-hoon is gone, at least until his next regression. Later, Yun offers Young-hoon a congratulatory present for reaching the Three Flowers realm. A surprised Young-hoon asks if the duel wasn't the gift, but Young-hoon simply presents him with a set of books. He gives him the scriptures of gazing cultivation and exceeding martial arts, lying that they are meant for a master of the Three Flowers realm. Yun claims he couldn't understand the complex texts himself, and an eager Young-hoon gratefully accepts the mysterious scriptures. After finally learning to read, Young-hoon becomes completely absorbed in studying the profound knowledge within the 6 volumes. 4 months pass as he dedicates himself to deciphering the scriptures. Our guy returns from a successful bounty hunt, calling out to his friend in their manner. But he finds the room empty, with only an open book left behind. Wondering if Young-hoon has already left on his journey, he then stretches out his senses but is perplexed to find no trace of his friend's presence anywhere. Suddenly, a sinister-looking Young-hoon materializes directly behind him, startling the protagonist, and proudly explains that he used a technique from the scriptures to completely conceal his presence, a feat that even Yun couldn't detect. Yun is left speechless, shocked by this strange and advanced technique, and recognizes it as an art Young-hoon had only learned in a past life after reaching a much higher realm, realizing the scriptures are accelerating his friend's growth at an unbelievable rate. His friend then boasts that if his stealth can fool a martial peak master like him, he could now assassinate anyone he pleases. Yun can only look on, once again faced with the insurmountable reality of his friend's sheer talent. Now ready, Young-hoon announces his plan to travel the lands for experience, inviting Yun to join him, but his friend politely declines the offer. Young-hoon misunderstands, thinking Yun wishes to stay and stabilize his own martial peak realm. But Yun reveals his true intentions, stating that he has developed an interest in the imperial regime. He then explains that by infiltrating the government, he can act as a powerful ally for Young-hoon from the shadows, a plan his friend gratefully accepts. And so, the two part ways, though Yun harbors a secret, a more selfish reason for his chosen path. He recalls information from a past life as a strategist, rumors that the imperial family of Yangguo is deeply connected to cultivators. Believing the royal family to be a branch of a cultivator clan, he decides to infiltrate their ranks by first joining the Yangguo military. His already fearsome reputation as a warrior and bounty hunter grants him easy entry. Using the martial prowess honed over multiple lifetimes, he quickly distinguishes himself and rises to the rank of general. Then, in just 5 years, he leverages his position to easily pass the trials and become a member of the elite Imperial Guard. The captain of the guard reminds him that as a peak realm master, his sole duty is now to protect his majesty with his life. Yunyun readily accepts his new responsibilities as a protector of the emperor. After completing further training in stealth and assassination, he is officially inducted into the emperor's personal shadow guards. Finally, the day arrives when Yunyun, hidden in the shadows of the throne room, gets his first audience with the emperor. As he observes the ruler of Yangguo, his heightened senses pick up on something truly astonishing. An immense spiritual pressure emanates from the throne, making him realize that the emperor is far more than he appears, and his suspicions are confirmed in a shocking revelation. The emperor himself is a cultivator. The emperor himself is a cultivator. The emperor of Yangguo smirks, his true identity as a cultivator now revealed to Yunyun. Argai finally confirms his 5-year-long suspicion. The emperor possesses the consciousness of a cultivator, born with a spiritual root. His investigation had also revealed that most of the imperial family were cultivators as well, albeit not very powerful ones. And yet, while they were cultivators, he knew that none of them came close to the overwhelming power of the Lord of the Forest. It made him question why a mere martial peak artist like himself is tasked with guarding key refining realm cultivators. Using his vision to gauge the emperor's power, he realizes the man's consciousness is far beyond a first-star chi refining stage and stronger than all the shadow guards combined. He concludes that the shadow guard is simply a convenience for an emperor who is too lazy to deal with assassins himself. As a shadow guard, he has learned that the emperor is the most targeted man in the entire empire. Assassins attack almost every night, and it's his duty to eliminate them. While cutting down another would-be killer, he grimly accepts this constant battle as a way to gain more experience. 5 years have passed, and he has served as a ruthless and efficient shadow guard all this time. During this time, his friend Kim Young-hoon has risen to become the esteemed alliance leader, though Yunyun's secret duties prevent them from meeting officially. Instead, the two meet in secret to drink and catch up on their separate lives. But the reason for this clandestine meeting is a truly momentous occasion. Using his special vision to analyze Young-hoon, Argai recalls that the red lines represent an opponent's most optimal attack trajectories. As Young-hoon sits in meditation, his aura flares violently, and Young-hoon senses that entering that space would mean instant death. The feeling is so intense that for a moment, he mistakes it for the consciousness of a cultivator. However, he laments his own limitations, wishing he had reached the three-flower stage to better understand what he is witnessing. But despite his confusion, he believes that observing this phenomenon will provide a crucial clue for his own future development. Young-hoon then exhales a breath of pure blue energy as his breakthrough commences. A surge of golden power erupts from him as he undergoes a profound transformation. The wave of energy is so powerful it blasts straight through the building. When the transformation completes, a rejuvenated Young-hoon announces that his body has changed. Yunyun congratulates his friend, while his friend confirms that he has successfully reached the realm of 5 energies converging to the origin. Young-hoon then notes that it is unfortunate his friend hasn't reached the three-flower stage. If he had, he would have gained much more from it. At this, Argai replies that it is only his fault because his skills are so meager. His friend tells him to ponder the scriptures he's been given, as they should still offer some help. Later, as they walk through the woods, Yunyun asks if Young-hoon has encountered any cultivators yet, and explains that Young-hoon's domain felt very similar to a cultivator's consciousness and asks if there's a connection. His friend theorizes that at his new level, he could likely fight a key refining cultivator head-on, and that the 5 energy state grants a vision similar to theirs. Yunyun processes this new information, realizing that martial artists can indeed train like cultivators after reaching a certain level. He speculates that the difference in vision between his own martial peak and Young-hoon's 5 energies must be unimaginably vast. After gaining valuable instruction from his friend, he returns to his duties at the palace, armed with new knowledge. A few days later, he is standing guard within the vast halls of the palace. Suddenly, a shadow moves stealthily high above the ground. He spots another assassin, a routine occurrence in his line of work. His vision flares to life, but this time he is shocked to discover the assassin has also reached the martial peak. He calmly deflects the assassin's projectiles, discerning from her skill that she has only recently attained the martial peak. The hooded assassin lunges from above, ready to strike. Their swords clash in a flurry of sparks as the two peak-level masters engage in a fierce duel. Yet as he blocks another blow, he finds the situation peculiar, his mind drifting elsewhere. Despite the high-stakes fight, he can't stop replaying the image of his friend attaining the 5 energies realm. As his sword glows with sword energy, he ponders its true nature, knowing it's the proof of reaching the intermediate stages of a first-rate warrior. and reflects that sword energy is a constant force, so long as his blade follows the optimal pathways shown by his vision. He considers that sword energy is about becoming one with his sword style and maximizing its potential. His initial conclusion is that sword martial arts and sword energy are ultimately the same concept. But a moment later he stops, realizing something about that conclusion is wrong. He reasons that if it were true, then even mindless Jiangshi puppets could wield sword energy if taught the proper forms. And then he has an epiphany. While sword energy is created by martial arts, its true source is the intention of the martial artist. He finally understands that the red and blue lines are not just optimal attacks, but the very trajectories of intention themselves. With this realization, he feels a strange sensation, as if veins are sprouting from his sword and connecting to his arm. The assassin presses her attack, completely unaware of the breakthrough her opponent is experiencing. Yun unleashes a new technique, deflecting the attack. The female assassin is left completely shocked as her sword is disarmed in an instant, and she is sent flying backward, utterly defeated by the unexpected move. But he knows this is just the beginning of his newfound power. He continues to infuse his intent into the sword, channeling the energy. The defeated assassin can only look on in disbelief at the power she just faced. Our guy then declares that he can now create sword silk in real life. With his sword now glowing with a solid, stable aura, he stands tall, a master who has achieved a new level of power. He marks the occasion. Within 10 years of becoming a peak master, he has finally mastered sword silk and reached the intermediate levels of martial peak. The man, Seo Yun, cloaked in his intimidating Shadow Guard uniform, calmly approaches the fallen assassin. Having recognized her from a past encounter, he realizes that she is one of the Emperor's servants who was recently hired. He laments that a martial artist with her talent could have reached the Three Flowers realm if she had survived, but she stuns him by recognizing him as the infamous infinite fighting monster. Yun is surprised that his fearsome reputation has spread so far and questions how she came to know of him. He then recalls the origin of his moniker, that once he called himself the Infinite Fighting Spirit, but the people of Yangguo twisted it into the Infinite Fighting Monster. In a flood of tears, the assassin reveals her motive, blaming the damned emperor for the tragic fate of her more talented sibling. Unmoved by her story, he coldly informs her that emotional appeals are useless, as the standing rule is to execute all assassins on the spot. Just then, other Imperial guards rush to the scene, shouting in alarm, believing it to be yet another assassination attempt. The assassin tries to warn him that he's making a mistake, screaming that people are dying on the Emperor's orders. Ignoring her desperate pleas, Yun executes her with a swift and merciless slash of his sword. He coldly rationalizes his actions, reminding himself that being convinced by an assassin is, in itself, a capital offense. His duty done, he stands over the lifeless body of the executed assassin. After a brief moment of disappointment at having to snuff out such excellent talent, he orders the other guards to help dispose of the corpse, and notes with suspicion that despite the loud commotion of the fight, the Emperor hasn't moved from his sleeping chambers. From this, he deduces that a powerful silence technique is active on the Emperor's chambers, a blatant display of his status as a cultivator. As he orders his men to tidy up, he reflects that all Shadow Guards know the Emperor is a cultivator, whose consciousness can be seen by those at the martial peak. Despite knowing the Emperor's true nature, he resolves to continue his duty, even as he notes the recent increase in assassination attempts. At this time, Yangguo is in a period of prosperity where commoners, though some are poor, are not desperate enough to become bandits. Examining a poisoned dagger, he wonders who is sending assassins that know of his title, noting the danger they pose. But he decides to set the investigation aside for now, reminding himself that his primary goal is to gather information about cultivators. 10 years later, his hard work has paid off, earning him the trust of the Emperor. Using the authority he gained, he managed to gather more information about the imperial family, although top secrets remained beyond his grasp. By poring over official government documents, he was finally able to uncover clues leading to the cultivators. A now bearded Yun lets out a sigh of relief, exclaiming that he has finally found their location. He reflects that while gathering information is difficult, his current position as a government official is far more effective than his old role as a strategist. Moreover, he believes the nightly experience of fighting assassins has pushed him closer to reaching the legendary Three Flowers realm. His research continues as he picks up the next document, a report on the national census. It claims that under the Emperor's rule, the number of orphans, beggars, and bandits has greatly decreased. Yun immediately becomes suspicious, questioning why an official government report would look so shabby and worn. He quickly pinpoints the glaring omission. The report never explains how the number of beggars decreased. Drawing on knowledge from his past life, he rules out mass starvation, an event he would have surely remembered. Knowing the emperor provided no aid or social mobility, he arrives at the chilling conclusion that the poor have simply been erased. The memory of the executed assassin's last words. "People are dying at the emperor's orders," echoes in his mind, confirming his dark suspicion. And he finds it strange for an average ruler like the emperor to commit such an act, and wonders where the erased lower-class citizens could have gone. Yun solidifies his theory. Missing information in government reports is always connected to the cultivators. Realizing the danger, he decides he must leave the rest of the investigation to his powerful friend Kim Young-hoon. The scene then shifts to the massive and impressive headquarters of the Murim Alliance. Here, the retirement ceremony for Kim Young-hoon, the first and only leader the alliance has ever known, is underway. Young-hoon is overjoyed to retire, as it signifies he has mastered the ancient scriptures and can finally begin his quest to find the cultivators. During a private meeting, he teases Yun, remarking that his aura as a shadow guard feels more like an assassin's with each passing day. However, our guy shares the intel he has gathered about the emperor, and the mere mention of cultivators immediately captures Young-hoon's full attention. He asks his friend to investigate the regions where cultivators are said to reside, and Young-hoon eagerly agrees, curious about what they're up to. With his plan in motion, he can now leverage his friend's strength to dig into the mysterious world of cultivators from a safe distance. Later that night, the Imperial Palace is quiet under the moonlit sky. Yun, now a vice squad leader, receives a status report confirming that the North Gate is secure. He muses that the assassination attempts have dwindled, guessing that his enemies have finally run out of Marshal Peak assassins to throw at him. But the calm is shattered by cries of an attack at the East Gate, followed by a massive fiery explosion. One of the Imperial guards is caught in the blast, screaming in agony as he's consumed by magical flames. A new, blue-haired assassin coolly assesses the situation, noting with surprise that all the guards are at the peak realm, and complains that their annoying vision prevents him from using his stealth techniques. Our guy reels in shock, realizing that their enemy has sent a full-fledged cultivator as an assassin this time. The Imperial Guard captain roars for his men to prepare themselves for an unprecedented battle. But the cultivator scoffs at their defiance, taunting them for having likely only ever fought weak, first-star key refining cultivators. Levitating with an air of superiority, he proudly declares himself to be a second-star cultivator of the key refining stage. With a cruel smile, he vows to kill them all before hunting down the branch family bastard of the Mockley clan. He then unleashes a powerful volley of flaming talismans, sending a wave of destruction toward the defending guards. The Imperial Shadow Guards are instantly incinerated, their agonizing screams drowned out by the roaring inferno. The cultivator smirks, pleased with the ease of his victory. However, standing resolute amidst the flames, Seo Yun emerges completely unscathed, his sword at the ready. The assassin's smug expression twists into one of utter disbelief as he demands to know how a mere martial artist could have blocked his attack, and adds, "For a damn insect, your eyes are rather arrogant for merely blocking a single attack." The Imperial Guard's attacks rebound harmlessly off a magical barrier erected by the assassin. The guards curse, realizing a barrier is blocking their path and leaving them to wonder about the chaos unfolding inside. A sinister purple energy envelops the building, a clear sign of a powerful cultivator's work. Recognizing the spell, a panicked guard screams for more troops while a glowing purple talisman holds the barrier in place. Inside, the battle is already over for some, as the Imperial Guard captain lies defeated amidst the burning corpses of his men. Yun, however, narrowly dodges a massive fire blast from the cultivator assassin. Despite being wounded, he presses his attack, determined to land a single decisive blow. He attempts to evolve his sword silk into the more powerful sword-enhanced chi, if only for a fleeting second. But the smug assassin mocks him, asking, "How many times must I repeat myself? You cannot break through my defensive techniques." His powered-up strike clashes against the cultivator's defensive technique, and his attack somehow breaks the barrier, yet fails to fully penetrate it. Annoyed by his persistence, the cultivator calls him a crazy fuckers for continuing the pointless struggle. The gambit fails, and the backlash throws him to the ground, but he manages to land a small slash on the cultivator's leg. Coughing up blood, he laments that his sword-enhanced chi is snuffed out instantly simply because he lacks a proper understanding of it. Repelled by the assassin, he falls to the ground. The remaining guards are shocked as the assassin approaches our guy. Enraged that this lowly man dared to even cut him, the cultivator prepares to stomp on his back. He brutally stomps down, pinning him to the ground. The cultivator grinds his foot, furious that such a lowly creature's managed to wound him. Deciding he's had enough fun, the assassin reveals he has changed his mind about toying with him before killing the emperor. He then summons a swarm of fire talismans, vowing to impale his victim and crush him to death. The deadly talismans form into sharp pikes, and begin raining down on the helpless guards. They are impaled and killed instantly by the overwhelming magic. Annoyed by his victim's defiance, the cultivator tells the insects not to interrupt him. Standing over his fallen foe, he condescendingly asks if he understands that his fate is to be crushed underfoot. The few remaining guards can only watch in horror, unable to help their pinned comrade. Yun chokes, realizing he used too much chi at once and has severely damaged his internal organs. Surprised that he is still alive, the cultivator sadistically grinds his heel into his hand, eager to see how long the insects can last. Lying in a pool of his own blood, our protagonist quietly agrees that he is indeed no different from an insect, and admits to himself that his talent, his skills, and his very life are as insignificant as a bug's. Misinterpreting his words, the assassin smirks, asking if he is finally begging for his life. But Yun defiantly declares that the eons of training he has endured will not simply disappear. With a surge of sheer willpower, he begins to push himself up from under the cultivator's foot, and declares that he figured it out when the cultivator used his stealth techniques. However, this guy has never trained his body, nor has he ever fought while properly considering distance. He scoffs that the man is merely talented, lucky enough to become a cultivator, but lacking any real battle sense. Refusing to lose to such a person, he grabs the cultivator's leg, turning the tables. Clutching the assassin's leg, he reaffirms his belief that his lifetime of effort was not futile and that he can still reach a higher stage. With a furious roar, he proclaims that there is meaning even in the struggle of an insect and refuses to let this man make him give up. Enraged, the cultivator tries to attack with his fire talismans, screaming for him to let go. But suddenly, the cultivator is shocked to feel a nosebleed, a sign that something is terribly wrong. A glint appears in Yun's eyes as he confirms that his real plan is working. The poison is finally taking effect. He reveals his strategy. The temporary sword-enhanced chi was just a distraction to deliver the real attack, the poison on his sword. The cultivator panics as the poison courses through him, desperately trying to nullify its effects. Tackling his foe, Yun snarls for him to have a taste of the very insects he looked down upon. To stop him from chanting incantations, he brutally shoves his hand into the cultivator's mouth. He then pins the assassin's arm to stop him from making hand seals, daring him to try using his spells now. The other guards can only watch in shock as the assassin struggles, crying for someone to help him. Just then, the defensive talisman shatters and the magical barrier finally collapses. Seeing their chance, the Imperial guards outside shout that the barrier has broken and charge into the hall. They burst in to find the room littered with their fallen comrades, with the cultivator lying dead on the floor. Yun stands over the corpse, grimly noting how the assassin had called him an insect, and coldly remarks that in death, the once arrogant cultivator is no different from anyone else. After some time, our guy finds himself recovering within the grand walls of the Imperial Palace. Watching over him, the Imperial captain calmly notes that the wounded Shadow Guard is finally awake. Annoyed by the smoke, our protagonist sarcastically asks him if it's appropriate to be smoking next to a patient. The captain confidently retorts that tobacco is a healthy herb, a statement that reminds Yun he's in a much more primitive time. After that, the captain informs him that his treatment is a sign of the Emperor's favor, as the skilled physician was assigned personally. As Yun marvels at how light his body feels, his attention is drawn to his heavily bandaged and permanently damaged right hand. The captain bluntly informs him that while he will be able to use his hand, it will never be as good as it was before the cultivator crushed it. Yet, Yun stoically accepts the grim prognosis, expressing gratitude that he can use the hand at all. Impressed by his subordinate's resolve, the captain presents an ornate box, revealing it as a special reward bestowed by the Emperor himself, and clarifies that since Shadow Guards can't be rewarded publicly, the Emperor ordered this gift to be given in private. With a grand declaration, he announces that for his bravery, Seo Eunhyun will be gifted the legendary empty chi pill. Overwhelmed by the honor, Yun performs a deep bow of gratitude, praising His Majesty for the generous reward. He opens the box to find a single, glowing red pill, a treasure he never dreamed of obtaining. The captain explains that the pill is made from the essence removed from a chi-building pill, though he admits he doesn't fully understand what that means. Yun, however, internally scoffs, realizing the so-called treasure is merely the leftover scraps from a real cultivator's elixir. He compares the pill's creation to gathering the residue left over after making other elixirs. This process of gathering the scraps is what is known as removing the key essence. Assuming the captain is ignorant, our guy dismisses such scraps as useless byproducts, typically sold as hangover medicine. However, just then, the captain reveals a shocking fact. When a mortal consumes this pill, it will increase their lifespan by a full 10 years. Yun is left speechless, stunned by the revelation that he holds the key to 10 more years of life in his hands. and notes that even his own leader coveted the pill, underscoring its immense value before leaving him to recover. Following the captain's advice, Yunyun decides to save the pill until his chi flow stabilizes before consuming it. He concludes that serving the Empire has its benefits, and wisely decides to save the pill for when he is near the end of his natural lifespan. Clutching the pill, a hopeful he celebrates, now convinced that joining the Imperial Guard was the correct choice for this life. Filled with a rare sense of optimism, he looks out at the palace, feeling that his life is finally on the right track. Years later, however, his training is interrupted as his sword falls from his grasp. He curses in frustration, as the searing pain in his mangled hand is a constant, agonizing reminder of his battle with the cultivator. Despite his body having healed, he laments that the uncontrollable pain prevents him from properly using his sword arts. Refusing to let this be the end of his martial arts journey, he clenches his fist, reminding himself that his path has always been one of suffering. He resolves to walk forward once more, accepting that pain has always been his companion and vowing not to let it stop him now. With renewed determination, he grips his sword through the agony, vowing to overcome his limitations and continue to grow stronger. Another decade passes, marking 30 years since the start of this regression. Now visibly older, Yunyun has grown accustomed to the pain, mastering his sword silk and hidden weapon techniques despite his injury. More importantly, he has been receiving coded letters from his friend Kim Young-hoon, who is close to uncovering the cultivator's secrets. Through these letters, he learns that proper cultivator clans live in hidden domains protected by powerful barriers. Within these hidden territories, they use mortals as slaves and servants to maintain their society. Young-hoon's investigation further reveals that a cultivator clan has been gathering talented mortals to train as assassins. Putting the pieces together, Yunyun finally understands. The poor people who vanished from the Empire were taken to the cultivator's domains. There, they are either forced into slavery or brutally trained to become assassins. From this, he concludes that the emperor he serves must be caught in a vicious power struggle between two rival cultivator clans. Deciding to put these larger concerns aside for the moment, he attempts to focus on his own martial arts training. But his concentration is shattered by the sudden appearance of Kim Young-hoon, who has come with urgent news. Young-hoon explains that he came in person because he discovered something truly shocking, far too sensitive for a letter. Before revealing his news, he quickly dispels a suspicious surveillance spell he detects in Eun-hoon's room. Young-hoon then lays out the political landscape, a power struggle between the current ruling Mokli clan and the former imperial family, the Jin clan. He explains that this struggle culminated a century ago when the Mokli clan successfully usurped the throne from the Jin. As a result of their diminished power, the Jin clan resorted to training mortal assassins to fight back against their rivals. He then poses a critical question: how could the Jin clan possibly create so many peak-level martial artists as if from a factory? And reveals the Jin clan's depraved secret: they infuse their warriors with vengeful spirits to forcibly heighten their talents and willpower. A horrified Yunyun asks if the Jin clan murdered the assassins' families, but Young-hoon clarifies that the current regime was responsible for that atrocity. The true culprits behind the massacres are none other than the Mokli clan, the very family that controls the empire. Stunned, Yunyun braces himself as Young-hoon prepares to deliver the most devastating revelation of all. Young-hoon exposes the Mokli clan's ultimate evil. For decades, they have been harvesting mortals to create a forbidden pill that extends cultivators' lifespans. They specifically target the poor and disenfranchised, kidnapping them in droves to serve as literal ingredients for their life-extending elixirs. The horrific truth dawns on Yunyun as he stammers: "Is that not cannibalism?" Young-hoon's shadowed face confirms the worst. "Yes, you're right. They are literally eating humans." Yunyun is racked with disgust, unable to process how cultivators, who claim to ascend to the heavens, could engage in such a disgusting, demonic act. The weight of the revelation is too much, and he is overcome with violent nausea. As he vomits, he realizes his sickness comes not just from the thought of cannibalism, but from the memory of the assassins he killed in the emperor's name. Guilt consumes him as he grapples with the fact that he dedicated his life to guarding these monsters, wondering how many innocents he killed to protect them. Young-hoon continues, explaining that during his investigation he was contacted by the Jin clan with an offer to join a raid against the Mokli. Declaring that such evil cannot be allowed to rule the nation, he announces his decision to join the Jin clan's rebellion. He then formally asks Eun-hoon to join him, arguing that while the Jin clan is cruel, they are still a better alternative to the revolting Mokli. In this moment of horrifying clarity, Yunyun understands that the entire foundation of his second life has crumbled. He realizes this grotesque power struggle between two evil clans was the true reason cultivators had appeared all those years ago. Disgusted that he wasted his life serving such a damned cause, an enraged Eun-hoon agrees to join the rebellion. And so, that day, he and Kim Young-hoon left the palace behind, joining the forces of rebellion to wage war against the cannibal cultivators of the empire. Yun and his ally, Kim Young-hoon, arrive at a pavilion on the outskirts of Seokyun, where all the greatest martial artists of Yangguo have gathered for the rebellion. The assembly is a true who's who of the martial world, including legendary figures like the Elders of the Four Stars and Three Demons and other great sects. Our guy assesses their combined strength, noting that with numerous martial peak masters and over 10 at the Three Flowers realm, they could easily overthrow the empire if it weren't for the cultivators. However, their ranks are filled with distrust, and one master immediately questions why Young-hoon would bring a former servant of the emperor into their midst. Realizing their deep-seated skepticism, Yun understands there's only one way to decisively earn their trust. And so, to shatter their suspicions, he launches into a sudden explosive tirade, screaming curses at his former master, the emperor. His profane outburst against the emperor leaves the stoic and powerful martial artist completely stunned and speechless. He continues, unleashing a stream of insults so creative and vile that they have to be censored. The masters are finally convinced, with one elder laughing that no true spy would dare utter such ear-rotting words and risk certain execution. Internally, Yun laments being stopped, as he still had plenty more insults left to share. Having now been accepted by the martial peak masters, the newly formed alliance departs to destroy an outpost of the demonic cultivators. Meanwhile, the leaders of the Jin clan observe the powerful alliance of martial artists, deeming their strength impressive for mortals. Yun recognizes their clothes and realizes that they belong to the same faction as the cultivator who attempted to assassinate the emperor years ago. The memory solidifies the truth. The assassin from years ago was secretly a member of the Jin clan, revealing the complex political war he was embroiled in. Young-hoon then formally presents the martial alliance to the Jin clan leader, fulfilling his promise to bring allies to help slay the devious cultivators. But before the main assault, Young-hoon asks Yun to follow him, stating that they have an important stop to make first. Sensing his friend's somber purpose, Yun quietly asks where they are going but receives only silence in return. He leads him to a vast, somber field of burial mounds, revealing to him the graves of the Mokli clan's countless victims, whom he had personally laid to rest. Shocked that Young-hoon buried them all himself, Yun watches as his friend prepares to cast the heaven-leading spell. He gathers a serene, glowing green energy in his hands, preparing a spiritual rite for the departed souls. Young-hoon explains that their souls are trapped by vengeance, so he learned this spell from the Jin clan to help them find peace and ascend. As ethereal lights rise from the graves, he imparts a lesson, reminding Eunhoon that not all cultivator spells are inherently disgusting. He continues his counsel, emphasizing that what's truly important is the intention with which one's power is used. He then offers a final, profound piece of advice, to focus on retaining one's humanity above the blind pursuit of strength. The lesson resonates deeply with Yun, and with a shared understanding, the two steel themselves for the battle ahead. With their moment of reflection over, the Jin clan leader performs a hand sign, opening a pathway directly into the Mokli clan's domain. A massive spatial rift tears through the landscape, revealing the path to the enemy fortress. The martial artists are stunned as the world warps before their very eyes, the familiar scenery replaced by the enemy's stronghold. They arrive before a desolate fortress where the air is thick with the horrifying stench of blood and rotting corpses. Instantly, alarms blare from the fortress as the Mokli clan guards shout that the Jin clan scoundrels have launched an attack. In response, a powerful, shimmering blue barrier materializes, enveloping the entire fortress in a protective shield. The Jin clan leader calmly observes the shield, acknowledging that the Mokli's barrier technique is indeed as excellent as ever. However, unfazed by the magical defense, Kim Young-hoon confidently steps forward to face the challenge head-on. A skeptical Jin clan cultivator scoffs, questioning why a mere mortal like him is acting as if he owns the place. But the clan leader quickly silences his man, shocking the followers by revealing that Young-hoon is a special mortal whose prowess is equal to his own. This stunning revelation sends a shockwave of disbelief through the other Jin clan cultivators. Meanwhile, Young-hoon begins to gather a swirling vortex of pure condensed energy in his palm. With a powerful war cry, he prepares to unleash the full might of his transcendent martial power. Yun watches in awe, recognizing that his friend is about to unleash power from a realm beyond even the five energies converging to the origin. Then, Young-hoon slams his palm downward, sending a cataclysmic shockwave of energy hurtling toward the fortress's barrier. The sheer force of the attack leaves the onlooking cultivators utterly speechless. Even the powerful Jin clan leader can't help but let out a grunt of acknowledgement at the display of mortal might. The Mokli's supposedly impenetrable barrier shatters like glass under the force of Young-hoon's single blow. With the barrier down, the fortress gates burst open, unleashing a horrifying horde of snarling Jiangshi. The Jin clan leader roars the command to charge, ordering the alliance to break through the undead and storm the fortress. The battlefield erupts into chaos as the allied martial artists and cultivators crash into the wave of reanimated corpses. Using his unique sensory abilities, the blindfolded Yunhyun leaps into the thick of the battle, effortlessly dispatching the undead. Seeing this, the low-level Mokli cultivators panic at the sight of such top-grade martial artists, shouting for retreat and reinforcements. A chilling sense of déjà vu hits Eunhyun as he recognizes the Jiangshi and the robes of their masters from a tragic past life. He finally realizes the horrifying truth. The cruel cultivator who puppeteered his master's corpse was, in fact, a member of the Mokli clan. As he fights on, his unique vision reveals a strange anomaly that piques his curiosity. He sees red strings of intent emanating from the Jiangshi and questions how mindless corpses could possibly possess any will of their own. Slicing through another undead, he deduces that it's not the controller's will he's seeing, but a lingering echo, and so he begins to search for the single puppeteer. His vision quickly pinpoints the source, a single, low-level cultivator floating above the battlefield, orchestrating the entire undead army. Gauging his target as a weak first star of the chi refining stage, Yunyun prepares to launch a swift assassination. In a flash of lightning-fast movement, he appears directly before the puppeteer and swings his blade, slashing across the puppeteer's forehead. Caught completely off guard, the terrified cultivator screams for his life, begging to be spared. Instead, Yunyun grabs the cultivator by the collar, demanding to know what he has seen. He drags him before a horrifying sight, a massive pyre where countless human bodies are being rendered down in a giant cauldron. The cultivator breaks down completely, screaming that this horrific scene is the first refinement process, and explains that they extract the blood and ki from mortals, using a spell formation to create a substance known as origin blood. This origin blood is then sent up the chain of command to higher-ranking domains for a secondary refinement, and so on up to a fifth. He confesses that after 5 such refinements, using the life essence of thousands of mortals, the process creates a single rejuvenation pill for their core formation elders. In a desperate plea, he offers our protagonist his refined origin blood, but Yunyun simply thanks him for the information. With cold fury in his eyes, he declares, "Now I don't need to hesitate to kill you," as the cultivator realizes his fate is sealed. But before he can execute the cultivator, an explosion that shatters a wall draws his attention. He looks up to see his former commander from the Imperial Guard. The Imperial Guard captain appears, his face a mask of fury as he shouts, "Silence." He stands backed by his elite squad, confronting his former subordinate on the battlefield of the very clan he once swore to protect. Leveling his weapon at Yunyun, he coldly declares that as far as he is concerned, he knows no traitors, setting the stage for a tense showdown. A massive explosion tears through the fortress as the battle rages on. "A traitor, you say?" Yunyun confronts his former commander, questioning if he knows about the Imperial family's monstrous acts. The commander simply charges forward, grimly admitting, "I know." Enraged, Yunyun demands to know how his commander could still swear loyalty to such a family. Their blades clash while the commander stoically declares, "We are the arms and legs of the emperor," and elaborates on his blind loyalty, stating that limbs do not think, they simply move according to the emperor's will. Our protagonist parries a powerful strike, yelling back that to the emperor, they are nothing more than livestock. Just then, the captain lands a kick, sending our guy flying. From a distance, Yunyun observes that the commander's skills have improved to a level nearing the Three Flowers realm. The commander asks him if the Jin clan he now sides with is any different. Our hero is cut off mid-sentence, and the commander tells him that they are all ascetics who view common people as insects, differing only in their scale and methods. As he lunges, he roars that, in the end, the Jin clan will also grind down the citizens for their own means, and may even prove to be worse than the current rulers. Activating his senses, Yunyun realizes that he cannot block the attack directly. Amidst the chaos, he spots a strange purple light glowing within the commander's technique. "If neither side is any better," the commander bellows, "then I'll stay loyal to the side I already chose." And so, he thrusts his polearm forward, channeling all his conviction into one final, overwhelming attack. Yunyun prepares to counter, acknowledging his opponent's intent to kill him in a single strike and respecting his conviction. He unleashes the Severing Mountain Sword, creating a massive wave of energy to meet the commander's charge. The two ultimate techniques collide in a blinding flash, a clash dubbed the Echoing Valley. As the dust settles, the commander appears, clearly in full shock. Yunyun vows to honor his opponent's resolve with a single, uncontrollable technique of his own, The commander stands stunned, armless, and defeated, admitting that his opponent's swordsmanship is truly astounding. Yun remarks that it is far too refined a sword art for someone like me. However, the dying commander dismisses this, revealing that the technique was the enlightenment of the three flowers, the most beautiful form he has ever seen. Gasping for breath, he confesses his life's pursuit of martial enlightenment felt hollow once he realized it was nothing compared to the power of even a lowly ascetic. He collapses, despairing that his devotion to martial arts meant nothing in the face of cultivators, and that he was left searching for any meaning to justify his path. He then remarks that it is a shame that their tragedy, their wills, and the paths they carried are so different. Our guy turns to the assembled Imperial Shadow Guard, demanding to know why they didn't interfere in the duel, and points out that if they had all joined the fight, he would be the one lying dead on the ground. One of the guards explains that it was the commander's final request to have a pure duel of martial strength, as he knew Eunhyun would otherwise use poison or other tricks. Despite the circumstances, the guards still respectfully address him as Vice Squad Leader, stating that once a commander, always a commander. With that, the guards ready their weapons, declaring that their sworn loyalty to His Majesty remains eternal. Our protagonist silently acknowledges their unwavering, yet misplaced, allegiance to the current emperor. With a heavy heart, he apologizes, realizing he may have to kill all of his former subordinates today. Just then, the tide of the larger battle turns as a massive explosion rocks the fortress. Jin clan cultivators are sent flying as a new, overwhelming force enters the fray. A furious Young-hoon rallies his troops, ordering them to advance and destroy the Mokli clan's refining furnace. Chaos ensues as his troops cut them down with ease. Just then, the Jin clan's powerful elders unleash a devastating fire attack upon the enemy forces. One of the Mokli commanders desperately screams for the reinforcements from the branch family. Elsewhere, our guy shatters the sword of the guard leaders, who is now badly injured and groaning in pain. A battered Eunhyun stands ready, breathing heavily after the prolonged fight. The guard leader questions why you would choose such a difficult path, paralysis poison of all things. He points out that he could have easily killed them all without injury, and questions why he chose to take the damage himself. Eunhyun simply responds, "You still called me Vice Squad Leader, didn't you?" A nod to their shared history and respect. The guard leader is taken aback by this unexpected display of sentiment. Collapsing from his wounds and the poison, he concedes that Eunhyun is a truly interesting man and asks if he's reached the three flowers. Sheathing his sword, Eunhyun admits he hasn't reached that level yet, but is just beginning to grasp its edges. He then reveals that while he can see the red light of attack and the blue light of defense, he has also glimpsed a third color, though not consistently. This third, purple light, appears, and he muses that he might just need another life-or-death fight to fully grasp it. As if on cue, Crown Prince Mokli Hyun appears, remarking on Eunhyun's incredible skill and revealing that his father sent him. Eunhyun greets the Crown Prince, immediately questioning why he didn't intervene while his own guards were being slaughtered. The prince laughs it off, saying it wouldn't have been as fun, and reminds him that today he is here as reinforcement for the Mokli clan, not as royalty. Enraged, our hero asks if watching his own loyal guards die is what the prince considers fun. The prince smugly asks if he knows why he was chosen to be the Crown Prince. Young-hoon's eyes widen in shock as he senses the prince's immense power. Mokli Hyun unleashes his aura, revealing he has reached the 4th star of the Chi refining stage, a level far beyond any martial artist's energy bloom enlightenment. With a terrifying, glowing-eyed grin, he taunts Eunhyun, asking how a mere mortal could possibly defeat someone who has reached the 4th star. The prince scoffs at the very idea of needing guards, while our protagonist is forced to acknowledge his overwhelming strength. He calculates that even a full 3 Flowers master would risk death fighting this monster, and he isn't even at that level yet, and knows he will surely die if he fights, and yet, a grim smile forms on his face. He doesn't mind dying if it means he can finally grasp the thread of enlightenment, recalling the ancient saying, if one can attain enlightenment in the morning, it is fine to die in the evening. He then remembers a past life in which his master faced 50 cultivators, and he was taught this very lesson by him. In that past life, Eunhyun couldn't understand the meaning, but now, charging towards certain death, he finally does. The Crown Prince mockingly calls him a fool for charging at him, knowing he will die. But he dashes forward anyway, determined to find his breakthrough in the face of death. He leaps into one final attack, determined to achieve the record of transcending cultivation and exhausting martial arts. Seo Eunhyun leaps into the air, preparing to strike the Crown Prince from above. However, he uses a deceptive move, vanishing in a puff of black smoke and leaving his opponent momentarily confused. Crown Prince Mokli Hyun is shocked to see his opponent disappear right before his very eyes. Baffled, he scans the battlefield, demanding to know where his foe has gone. Meanwhile, our protagonist has an epiphany, realizing he finally understands the records that reach the heavens. He then recalls the record of transcending cultivation, admitting that although he had memorized it, he never truly grasped its meaning until this moment. He now understands that seeing the purple path, the clash of wills, was the key to his enlightenment. A phrase from his master's records echoes in his mind, questioning if one could attack the very color of will itself. Having grasped that color represents a person's will, he finally understands that attacking the color means eliminating the opponent's will to fight. So he immediately puts his newfound theory into practice, moving to directly attack the Crown Prince's will. Mak Lee-hyun is stunned as his opponent disappears once more, questioning how he could have vanished from his senses. Our hero realizes his friend Kim Young-hoon had used the same technique in his past life, cutting into his own will to become invisible. The Crown Prince can only watch in disbelief as our guy reappears right in front of him, seemingly out of thin air. He finally understands, this is the martial art that allows mortals to transcend the heavens and stand against cultivators. Barely saved by his automatic barrier, Mak Lee-hyun angrily demands to know what kind of trick his opponent is using. As Yoon-yun's blade is deflected, he is also stunned to find that the cultivator has surrounded his body with a defensive barrier, and he is violently thrown back by the sheer force of the cultivator's protective chi. He crashes into the ground with explosive force, shattering the ground beneath him. Unfazed, Mak Lee-hyun mockingly compliments the swordsman's interesting move. Then he declares he will show him the true power of a cultivator and summons a raging hurricane of energy. Yoon-yun assesses the situation, realizing that he must dodge the deadly blades of wind. He is battered by the force of the attack, narrowly avoiding being torn apart. He analyzes his predicament, knowing he can't simply match the attack with the record of transcending cultivation, since the hurricane is made of deadly blades. And he understands that even if he could get close, he would still have to break through the prince's personal barrier to land a hit. So, he concludes that simply dodging and observing his opponent's will from the outside is not a winning strategy. Acknowledging that a martial artist's internal energy is less pure and tires faster than a cultivator's, he knows he's on a timer. With grim determination, he decides he must reach the legendary 3 flowers gathering at the summit in this very moment to have any hope of winning. The Crown Prince is perplexed as Yoon-yun suddenly stops moving amidst the chaotic storm. Our guy defiantly stands his ground and taunts the prince, asking if he is already tired. With a powerful cry, our hero counters with his own technique, the Severing Mountain Sword. He then unleashes the Ascending Vein form, charging directly into the cultivator's devastating attack. Mak Lee-hyun is visibly shocked by the sheer force of his opponent's counterattack. Despite the immense pain racking his sword hand, Yoon-yun grits his teeth, knowing he must face this attack head-on. So he cycles through the complex forms of the Severing Mountain Sword style, combining them into one desperate, fluid assault. Pushing himself beyond his limits, he resolves to continue fighting even if his body is reduced to ashes. Enraged by this mortal's defiance, the Crown Prince sneers, "How dare you?" He then unleashes his ultimate technique, a gigantic beast made of pure energy that roars with destructive power. The cultivator commands his energy beast to attack, screaming, "Die now," at the battered swordsman. Facing certain annihilation, Yoon-yun instinctively knows he cannot stop or dodge this attack and will die the moment it hits him. Yet, feeling no fear, he focuses his entire being on the faint, purple-hued will he can now perceive. In this moment of extreme clarity, he understands that the blue color is his own will of self-defense, while the red is the enemy's murderous intent. His mind races to decipher the final piece of the puzzle, the meaning of the color purple. He realizes that the purple will is the mixture of his own intent and that of his opponent. The cultivator's monstrous energy beast lunges forward to consume him. Just then, our protagonist experiences a profound paradigm shift, understanding that from his opponent's perspective, their will is blue and his is red. He grasps that it is all a matter of perspective, and in this shared space of conflict, they are the same color. He finally comprehends his master's words and the true nature of the 3 flowers gathering at the summit, seeing his own actions reflected through his opponent's will. By reflecting his moves onto the cultivator's will, he suddenly sees how much precious chi he has been wasting. With this newfound efficiency, he instantly achieves the legendary state of sword-enhanced chi. He understands now why he could never maintain sword-enhanced chi before. Martial arts is not a solitary endeavor. The ultimate truth of martial arts dawns on him. One must connect with the opponent and the world's will to truly complete it. Having achieved this ultimate enlightenment, he prepares to unleash the perfected 5th form of his sword style and calls out the name of his ultimate technique, Severing Mountain. His perfected attack, now infused with transcendent understanding, clashes directly with the prince's energy beast. The two colossal attacks collide, creating a massive explosion that obliterates the battlefield. The paralyzed Imperial guards, who had been poisoned by Yun earlier, could only watch the hopeless duel from the ground. They watched the aftermath, certain that their former commander's struggle was futile against a cultivator. They believed no one from the Murim could ever defeat a cultivator, a being from an entirely different realm of existence. But as the dust begins to settle, a figure emerges, taking a solid step forward. The Imperial Guard's eyes bulge in utter disbelief at the sight before them. Seo Eunhyun stands transformed, wreathed in a golden aura, having finally reached the legendary realm of the Three Flowers gathering at the summit. The newly transformed Eunhyun focuses his power, preparing to unleash it upon the Crown Prince. Having reached the legendary state of the Three Flowers gathering at the summit, he feels all his previously wasted energy returning to him. Across from him, Crown Prince stares in disbelief, utterly baffled by how a mere mortal could achieve such a sudden and profound transformation. Now overflowing with newfound power, Yun looks down on his foe and coolly warns him to prepare himself. Unimpressed, the prince mocks his single achievement while beginning to weave complex hand signs for a far more powerful spell. He summons a terrifying torrent of monstrous earth dragons, unleashing a massive attack meant to overwhelm the martial artist. Yet, completely unfazed by the cultivator's spell, the enlightened Eunhyun calmly assesses that these monsters are no longer capable of killing him. And he has a profound realization: his two ultimate martial arts, the transcending peak and mountain lord styles, are actually a single unified art. So, he manifests a spiritual tiger, unleashing the perfected technique known as the Mountain Lord Transcends to the Peak. Pushing his newfound understanding to the limit, his entire being rushes forward, his ultimate technique now aimed towards flight. His spiritual tiger and the earth dragons clash as he executes the devastating Mountain Lord Transcending Peak flight technique. The Crown Prince can only watch in horror as his powerful cultivation spell is completely shattered by the martial artist's impossible technique. The sheer force of his perfected martial arts tears through the prince's attack, obliterating the battlefield. The clash between a peak mortal and a powerful cultivator results in a massive, ground-shaking explosion. Scrambling to defend himself, the prince conjures a defensive whirlwind, arrogantly challenging his opponent to break through this next barrier. A powerful vortex composed of millions of wind blades swirls around him, forming what should be an impenetrable defense. Eunhyun calmly analyzes the new threat, recognizing it as a dense concentration of cultivation techniques. However, against this seemingly perfect defense, he unleashes the ninth form of his sword art, landscape painting. To the prince's absolute astonishment, his whirlwind of wind blades is effortlessly deflected by the perfected martial art. While his previous attacks were unable to pierce the cultivator's defensive techniques, his new sword-enhanced ki slices through the prince's defenses as if they were nothing, landing a decisive blow. Mok Lee-hyun lets out a blood-curdling scream as the enhanced sword ki tears a gruesome wound across his neck. In a desperate last stand, he unleashes all his remaining power in a final, explosive attack, screaming for his foe to die. But Eunhyun stands calmly amidst the dissipating energy, holding his ground with his sword poised for the final blow. Clutching his bleeding throat, a terrified Mok Lee-hyun stumbles back, weakly warning him not to come any closer. The panicked prince continues to launch small, desperate explosions, trying to repel the implacable martial artist. The panicked prince continues to launch small, desperate explosions, trying to repel the implacable martial artist. And he runs for his life. Declaring that he won't let him get away, Eunhyun leaps high into the air to finish the fight. He closes the distance in an instant and cuts off the prince's legs. Mok Lee-hyun crashes to the ground in a heap while Eunhyun lands gracefully, his victory all but secured. Writhing in agony and disbelief, the prince cannot comprehend how he, a powerful cultivator, could be defeated by a mere mortal. As Eunhyun approaches, the defeated prince resorts to psychological warfare, sneering that the Jin clan is just as corrupt as his own. The prince attempts to break his spirit by revealing that the Jin clan also creates pills for mortals, reminding him of the empty chi pills he received years ago. But Eunhyun casually reveals the very same red pill, asking with disdain, "You mean this?" Stating he has no intention of consuming pills made by revolting cultivators, he crushes the symbol of corruption into dust. Mok Lee-hyun is left utterly speechless, his final psychological gambit having failed completely. With a cold farewell, Eunhyun raises his sword to deliver the final, long-awaited execution. But suddenly, a blinding red flash appears, signaling the decapitating strike. As Eunhyun's world turns upside down, his last conscious thought is confusion about why he is falling. He realizes his head has been severed by an attack far beyond what a normal ki-refining cultivator could ever make. He understands this was a transcendent attack, something only a high-level cultivator or the legendary Kim Young-hoon could perform. As his life fades, his past lives, from his first until now, flash before his eyes. He recalls his second life, a pivotal moment where he witnessed Young-hoon finally slay a cultivator. This memory of Young-hoon's triumphant declaration that martial artists can defeat cultivators fuels his dying spirit and remembers the pain of that second life ending in an instant, and how the hope he just gained was cruelly shattered. The desperate, angry cries for more strength from his past selves echo in his mind. Looking at his own severed head, he resolves that, having reached this level, he will not die helplessly again. A single, burning thought consumes his final moments of consciousness: I need to kill him. Meanwhile, the prince gasps for air, shocked to find himself still alive, and realizes he was saved by a single-use talisman from his father, which blocked the cultivator-level attack. Relieved and arrogant, he breaks into maniacal laughter, believing he has won. Our guy asks himself, is it always the cultivators who win in the end? But just then, a memory of Kim Young-hoon's defiance echoes in his mind. Martial artists can defeat the cultivator. He recalls watching Young-hoon face down an army of cultivators, a sight that now fills him with unease. Young-hoon's warning rings in his ears, that even if he defeats one, there are countless more powerful cultivators in the heavens. Suddenly, the prince realizes in horror that he has used up all his energy. Yunyun's unyielding will to fight brings to mind a different memory, one of overwhelming despair, from the time he once faced cultivators and was nearly broken by them. However, he always knew that Kim Young-hoon, his friend, was different. Back in the present, Mak Lee-hyun stares in absolute horror, unable to comprehend what is happening. He recalls the moment Young-hoon sacrificed himself, telling him to survive while he held back their enemies. Paralyzed by fear, the prince watches as Eun-yun's headless corpse begins to push itself up from the ground. This impossible act is not magic or a trick. It is the embodiment of pure, unadulterated will. What? This is impossible, the prince screams, terrified by the sight of a mortal with such an unbreakable will. This moment of indomitable spirit is what our guy had witnessed in the past, yelling at his friend not to sacrifice his life for him. Young-hoon's final words of encouragement were a testament to his faith in his friend's endless effort. Back in the present, the prince shouts, "Why won't you just give up?" But just then, our guy's headless body, imbued with his friend's indomitable will, swings his sword and cuts off the prince's head. Seo Yoon-yun's body, forged through a lifetime of brutal training and a hand that had gripped a sword for decades, continued to perform its duty, driven by pure instinct and refined martial arts, even after his consciousness had faded. Even in his final moment, as the headless body delivered the true killing blow, the prince was filled with nothing but disbelief and terror. In stark contrast, Yun-yun, even with his head severed, died with a peaceful, satisfied smile on his face, and so, his life of endlessly refining his body and spirit finally came to a meaningful and triumphant end. He recalls his friend praising him, "You swing well, keep going at it, and you have the mindset that it's alright to die in the evening if you reach a higher stage in the morning. Your efforts will someday bring you a new day befitting the sweat you've endured." His master's voice echoes as his life fades away. And with that final, satisfying memory, Seo Yun-yun's fifth regression comes to a close.
Hey everyone! If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out and lets me bring you more great content.